What's up, everybody? Thanks for clicking this video. Thanks for tuning into my channel. My name is Simon Hill, Black American from Louisiana, coming to you live from Budapest, Hungary. Today is July 3rd, 2026, about 4:55 p.m. where I'm at right now. And we are continuing our 22nd book in our Book to React series. We are in Volume 3 of Leon Trotsky's The History of the Russian Revolution. For today's episode, which is episode 43, we will be tackling the Art of Insurrection. And I'm looking forward to reading this because the previous chapter was Lenin calling the Bolsheviks to insurrection. After reading this book in several chapters, like chapter 41 in yesterday's live stream, what I've gained from this book is that revolution is an art form, and many people who claim to be revolutionaries are not really about that life. That's a short sum total of everything that we spoke about in our previous live stream. So shout out to Shaista Chanel. She says, hello, sir. Well, hello to you too, but you don't have to call me sir. Call me comrade. Say hello, comrade, and welcome Shaista Chanel to the channel. And Boda Actra says, if you're going to have a successful revolution, you need to find an answer for the F-22 and F-35. Otherwise, it's going to be a very short revolution. That is absolutely true. And what we have learned from reading this book after several weeks is that we can get the F-22 and the F-23 through proper propaganda. Literally, the Bolsheviks did such a good job propagandizing to the soldiers who were being disaffected by the bourgeois liberal government of Imperial Russia that literally a warship landed in their hands. Fleets of warships, soldiers handed over the guns. In the episode 41, when we read chapter 40, Trotsky literally ordered 10,000 guns. The soldiers came to him and said, hey, we just went to the factory and they're willing to give you some guns. And so Trotsky tried it out. He said, can I just get 10,000 for free? And 10,000 of them bitches landed in his lap. So yes, the answer to the F-22 and F-35 and the M16 and the nuclear warhead and the nuclear submarine and any of the weapons of mass destruction that the American empire has put together is propaganda. That is the answer. That is the only answer, okay? Bodactra said Lenin murdered a lot of people. He sure did. He sure did. And they rightfully deserved to die. They rightfully deserved to die. All right. Anything else? Anything else y'all want to say? Because we're starting off hot today. We're starting off hot. It seems like the counter-revolutionaries and the bourgeois are out here. Wait till my commissars hop in the chat. They're going to smack you bitches with a backhand. A big proletariat backhand is coming for all you motherfuckers. So anybody else want to say something? Because we got all the smoke today. We got all the smoke today. Anyway, like I was saying, for today's episode, we're reading The Art of Insurrection, where Trotsky is going to break down, the difference between spontaneous revolts, spontaneous riots, and the art of actually succeeding in overthrowing a bourgeois, capitalistic, decadent society. All right? So, before we jump into the live stream, we have both chats going. We have the horizontal live stream on the computer right here. Looking forward to reading the comments in that section. And we also have the vertical live stream going, where already the counter-revolutionaries are very, very active. And if you want to know what we are talking about, for example, Shaista Chanel, just click the description and you can see exactly what we are talking about. So, without further ado, let's jump into it. Chapter 42, The Art of Insurrection, from Leon Trotsky's The History of the Russian Revolution. People do not make revolution eagerly any more than they do war. There is this difference, however, that in war, compulsion plays the decisive role. In revolution, there is no compulsion except that of circumstances. A revolution takes place only when there is no other way out. And the insurrection, which rises above a revolution like a peak in the mountain chain of its events, can no more be evoked at will than the revolution as a whole. The masses advance and retreat several times before they make up their minds to the final assault. Okay, so very important what Trotsky is laying out here. There's a difference between revolution and war. Nobody likes war the same way nobody really likes revolution. As Trotsky has said in this book before, the spirit of man is naturally conservative. Most people want stability. Most people do not want radical change. But people will bring about radical change if they are pushed to their absolute limits. And there is a difference between revolution and insurrection. A revolution is spontaneous somewhat. A revolution is change that is almost, is based in material circumstances of people's lives, dictating their choices. But an insurrection is the planned overthrow of a government and is a finely tuned art. Okay? So, continuing here. Conspiracy is ordinarily contrasted to insurrection as the deliberate undertaking of a minority to a spontaneous movement of the majority. And it is true that a victorious insurrection, which can only be the act of a class called to stand at the head of the nation, is widely separated both in method and historic significance from a governmental overturn accomplished by conspirators acting in concealment from the masses. In every class society, there are enough contradictions so that a conspiracy can take root in its cracks. Historic experience proves, however, that a certain degree of social disease is necessary, as in Spain, for instance, or Portugal, or South America, to supply continual nourishment for a regime of conspiracies. A pure conspiracy, even when victorious, can only replace one clique of the same ruling class by another, or still less, merely alter the governmental personages. Only mass insurrection has ever brought the victory of one social regime over another. Periodical conspiracies are commonly an expression of social stagnation and decay, but popular insurrections, on the contrary, come usually as a result of some swift growth that has broken down the old equilibrium of the nation. The chronic revolutions of the South American republics have nothing in common with the permanent revolution. They are, in a sense, the very opposite thing. So what Trotsky is saying here is that to successfully bring about a change in regime, a change in administration, a change in governance, it takes popular mass movement. Okay, only mass insurrections has ever brought about the victory of one social regime over another. I would argue that mass movement or popular mass movement does not mean that the majority of people go along with it. For example, in the American Revolution, there was a sizable amount of people who were royalist. There were people who were loyal to the king even during the height of George Washington and Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, etc., etc. Many of those people fled to Canada. Many of those people moved back to Great Britain. But yet and still, there was a large amount of people that still supported the king. And I would argue every bourgeois revolution is, to some degree, a minority revolution. The opposite of a proletarian revolution, which is supposed to be the popular masses. So I'm not exactly sure if I understand correctly what Trotsky is saying, if he believes a mass insurrection means the majority of people want it, or if it's a very large amount, a sizable, unignorable segment of the population. I would argue that a sizable segment of the population, though not a majority, is enough to have a mass insurrection and a change in social regime. But I digress. This does not mean, however, that popular insurrection and conspiracy are in all circumstances mutually exclusive. An element of conspiracy almost always enters to some degree into any insurrection. Being historically conditioned by a certain stage in the growth of a revolution, a mass insurrection is never purely spontaneous. Even when it flashes out unexpectedly to a majority of its own participants, it has been by those ideas in which the insurrectionaries see a way out of the difficulties of existence. But a mass insurrection can be foreseen and prepared. It can be organized in advance. In this case, the conspiracy is subordinate to the insurrection, serves it, smooths its path, hastens its victory. The higher the political level of a revolutionary movement and the more serious its leadership, the greater will be the place occupied by conspiracy in a popular insurrection. It is very necessary to understand the relations between insurrection and conspiracy, both as they oppose and as they supplement each other. It is especially so because the very use of the word conspiracy, even in Marxist literature, contains a superficial contradiction due to the fact that it sometimes implies an independent undertaking initiated by the minority, at others a preparation by the minority of a majority insurrection. History testifies, to be sure, that in certain conditions, a popular insurrection can be victorious even without a conspiracy, arising spontaneously out of the universal indignation, the scattered protest, demonstrations, strikes, street fights. An insurrection can draw in a part of the army, paralyze the forces of the enemy, and overthrow the old power. To a certain degree, this is what happened in February 1917 in Russia. Approximately the same picture is presented by the development of the German and Austro-Hungarian revolutions of the autumn of 1918. Since in these events there was no party at the head of the insurrectionaries imbued through and through with the interest and aims of the insurrection, its victory had inevitably to transfer the power to those parties that up to the last moment had been opposing it. To overthrow the old power is one thing. To take the power in one's own hands is another. The bourgeoisie may win the power in a revolution, not because it is revolutionary, but because it is bourgeoisie. It has in its possession property, education, the press, a network of strategic positions, a hierarchy of institutions, quite otherwise with the proletariat. Deprived in the nature of things of all social advantages, an insurrectionary proletariat can count only on its numbers, its solidarity, its cadres, its official staff. So what Trotsky is saying here is that, the bourgeoisie, similar to what I was saying earlier, have the advantage of having money, power, the media, the army, all of that shit on their side because they're rich. They own the means of production. They have a monopoly on violence and a monopoly on wealth in general. Meanwhile, the proletariat don't have that. But what they do have is numbers, which is what we say all the time. They might have money, but we have the masses. Very important to consider. Just as a blacksmith cannot seize the red-hot iron in his naked hand, so the proletariat cannot directly seize the power. It has to have an organization accommodated to this task. The coordination of the mass insurrection with the conspiracy, the subordination of the conspiracy to the insurrection, the organization of the insurrection through the conspiracy constitutes that complex and responsible department of revolutionary politics that Marx and Engels called the art of insurrection. It presupposes a correct general leadership of the masses, a flexible orientation in changing conditions, a thought-out plan of attack, cautiousness in technical preparation, and a daring blow. Historians and politicians usually give the name of spontaneous insurrection to a movement of the masses united by a common hostility against the old regime, but not having a clear aim, deliberated methods of struggle, or a leadership consciously showing the way to victory. This spontaneous insurrection is condescendingly recognized by official historians, at least those of democratic temper, as a necessary evil, the responsibility for which falls upon the old regime. The real reason for their attitude of indulgence is that spontaneous insurrection cannot transcend the framework of the bourgeois regime. Shout out to Bella Angelo. He says, "Is Jesus your God?" In the words of Jay-Z, I don't pray to God, I pray to God-T. But no, I'm a Muslim and I worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I believe Muhammad is the last messenger, but that has nothing to do with what we are talking about. I warn you all again, if you jump off topic, if you do not answer one of the questions I pose, the poll question or anything related to the text, you will quickly get sent to the re-education camp or the gulag, which means permanent banning. So if you want to engage, let's talk about this. What is a better method for us socialists, for us leftists, to gain power? Is it electoralism? Is it Blanquism, the idea that we should just have a small clique of people conspiring to overthrow the government and institute our rule? Or is it mass worker movement with the art of insurrection as our way of organizing the mass movement toward the goal of overthrowing the system? So once again, the question for the audience is, what is the best way for us socialists, leftists, communists to gain power? Electoralism, Blanquism, or mass movement directed at the regime we wish to overthrow? Answer that and your question, your comment will be answered. Okay, it's very simple. But if you don't want to deal with the text or the questions, get the fuck out of here. Okay, continuing here. The Social Democrats take a similar position. They do not reject revolution at large as a social catastrophe any more than they reject earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, eclipses, and epidemics of the plague. What they do reject calling it Blanquism, or still worse, Bolshevism, is the conscious preparation of an overturn, the plan, the conspiracy. In other words, the Social Democrats are ready to sanction, and that only ex post facto, those overturns that hand the power to the bourgeoisie. But they implacably condemn those methods that might alone bring the power to the proletariat. Under this pretended objectivism, they conceal a policy of defense of the capitalist society. From his observations and reflections upon the failure of the many insurrections he witnessed or took part in, Auguste Blanqui derived a number of tactical rules that, if violated, will make the victory of any insurrection extremely difficult, if not impossible. Blanqui demanded these things: a timely creation of correct revolutionary detachments, their centralized command and adequate equipment, a well-calculated placement of barricades, their definite construction, and a systematic, not a mere episodic, defense of them. All these rules, deriving from the military problems of the insurrection, must of course change with social conditions and military technique, but in themselves they are not by any means Blanquism, in the sense that this word approaches the German Putschism, or revolutionary adventurism. Insurrection is an art, and like all art, it has its laws. The rules of Blanqui were the demands of a military revolutionary realism. Blanqui's mistake lay not in his direct, but his inverse theorem. From the fact that the tactful weakness condemns an insurrection to defeat, Blanqui inferred that an observance of the rules of insurrectionary tactics would itself guarantee the victory. Only from this point on is it legitimate to contrast Blanquism with Marxism. Conspiracy does not take the place of insurrection. An active minority of the proletariat, no matter how well organized, cannot seize the power regardless of the general conditions of the country. In this point, history has condemned Blanquism, but only in this. His affirmative theorem retains all its force. In order to conquer the power, the proletariat needs more than a spontaneous insurrection. It needs a suitable organization. It needs a plan. It needs a conspiracy. Such is the Leninist view of this question. So this is very interesting. What Trotsky is saying here is that us Marxists don't fully discard Blanquism, the idea that a small enlightened clique should seek to form a conspiracy to overthrow the government. That is not totally wrong. But what is wrong is believing that only a small group of enlightened conspiratorial individuals are capable of overthrowing the government. What Marxism or Leninism seeks to do is fuse Blanquism with Marxism. Marxism posed the art of the insurrection. Leninism fuses the art of the insurrection with Blanquism, the idea that a small clique should be leading the masses towards insurrection. All right, continuing here. Engels' criticism of the fetishism of the barricade was based upon the evolution of military technique and of technique in general. The insurrectionary tactic of Blanquism corresponded to the character of the old Paris, the semi-handicraft proletariat, the narrow streets of the military system of Louis Philippe. Blanqui's mistake in principle was to identify revolution with insurrection. His technical mistake was to identify insurrection with the barricade. The Marxist criticism has been directed against both mistakes. Although at one with Blanquism in regarding insurrection as an art, Engels discovered not only the subordinate place occupied by insurrection in a revolution, but also the declining role of the barricade in an insurrection. Engels' criticism had nothing in common with a renunciation of the revolutionary methods in favor of pure parliamentarism, as the Philistines of the German social democracy, in cooperation with the Hohenzollern censorship, attempted in their day to pretend. For Engels, the question about barricades remained a question about one of the technical elements of an uprising. The reformists have attempted to infer from his rejection of the decisive importance of the barricade a rejection of revolutionary violence in general. That is about the same as to infer the destruction of militarism from considerations of the probable decline in importance of trenches in future warfare. The organization by means of which the proletariat can both overthrow the old power and replace it is the Soviet. This afterward became a matter of historic experience, but was up to the October Revolution a theoretical prognosis, resting, to be sure, upon the preliminary experience of 1905. The Soviets are organs of preparation of the masses for insurrection, organs of insurrection, and after the victory, organs of government. However, the Soviets by themselves do not settle the question. They may serve different goals according to the program and leadership. The Soviets receive their program from the party, whereas the Soviets in revolutionary conditions, and apart from revolution they are impossible, comprise the whole class with the exception of its altogether backward, inert, or demoralized strata. The Revolutionary Party represents the brain of the class. The problem of conquering the power can be solved only by a definite combination of party with Soviets, or with other mass organizations more or less equivalent to Soviets. When headed by a revolutionary party, the Soviet, consciously and in good season, strives toward a conquest of power. Accommodating itself to changes in the political situation and the mood of the masses, it gets ready the military bases of the insurrection, unites the shock troops upon a single scheme of action, works out a plan for the offensive and for the final assault, and this means bringing organized conspiracy into mass insurrection. So once again, this falls in line with one of the main themes that we've been seeing throughout this text. Throughout the text, we've seen the Bolsheviks struggle with keeping up with the masses. The Bolsheviks did first start to organize the workers into the Soviets. They explained to the Soviets and told the workers that you can form workers' council to, run the factories, to run the city, to run the looms, to run the fields, etc., etc. Right? But the part of the party at that moment in time was essentially to help guide the workers, right, on their path of historical development to reach their ultimate destiny. And at times they struggled with this because the workers were ready for revolution. They were ready for insurrection. And now we see that the vanguard party, the Bolsheviks, are now living up to their destiny by actually trying to unify the workers in the goal of insurrection, which is overthrowing the regime finally. So this is a theme that we've seen throughout the text, and now Trotsky is laying out, the art form of, actually overturning the regime, and the importance of the Soviets, which are the workers' councils, the vanguard party, and all of them being in tandem, working in unison, doing the sweet dance to actually have a successful insurrection. All right, continuing here. The Bolsheviks were compelled more than once, and long before the October Revolution, to refute accusations of conspiracy and Blanquism directed against them by their enemies. Moreover, nobody waged a more implacable struggle against the system of pure conspiracy than Lenin. The opportunist of the international social democracy more than once defended the old social revolutionary tactic of individual terror directed against the agents of Tsarism. When this tactic was ruthlessly criticized by the Bolsheviks with their insistence upon mass insurrection, as opposed to the individual adventurism of the intelligentsia. But in refuting all varieties of Blanquism and anarchism, Lenin did not for one moment bow down to any sacred spontaneousness of the masses. He thought out before anybody else and more deeply the correlation between the objective and subjective factors in a revolution, between the spontaneous movement and the policy of the party, between the popular masses and the progressive classes, between the proletariat and its vanguard, between the Soviets and the party, between insurrection and conspiracy. But if it is true that an insurrection cannot be evoked at will, and that nevertheless, in order to win, it must be organized in advance, then the revolutionary leaders are presented with the task of correct diagnosis. They must feel out the growing insurrection in good season and supplement it with a conspiracy. The interference of the midwife in labor pains, however this image may have been abused, remains the clearest illustration of this conscious intrusion into an elemental process. Herzen once accused his friend Bakunin of invariably, in all his revolutionary enterprises, taking the second month of pregnancy for the ninth. Herzen himself was rather inclined to deny, even in the ninth, that pregnancy existed. In February, the question of determining the date of birth hardly arose at all, since the insurrection flared up unexpectedly without centralized leadership. But exactly for this reason, the power did not go to those who had accomplished the insurrection, but to those who had applied the brakes. It was quite otherwise with the second insurrection. This was consciously prepared by the Bolshevik Party. The problem of correctly seizing the moment to give the signal for the attack was thus laid upon the Bolshevik staff. So what Trotsky is doing here is, in a way, making a metaphor about sex. He's saying that the February Revolution was essentially like a hookup, a one-night stand, or finally you get laid after dating the girl for a long time. Unfortunately, you've been dating the girl since 1905, and she finally drops the drawers in 1917, but nevertheless, you got the cookies. And I don't think it's lost on anybody who's reading this that February and October are roughly 9 months apart, if my math is right. Once again, this is why I'm an English teacher. This is why I read. Math is not my strong suit. But if I put the numbers together, February to October is roughly 9 months, the same time it takes a baby to be born. And Trotsky's making the metaphor that revolution and insurrection are similar to sex and birth. Revolution is sex. It's sort of unplanned, unorganized, kind of messy, kind of sticky, okay? And then insurrection is birth. You know the birth is going to happen. She called you up. She said she's pregnant. You said, who is it? Whose is it? And now the only thing to do is actually help the baby, see the light of day, have the baby be born. And so that's what he's saying here. Other revolutionary thinkers were confused about when babies are born. He's sort of making a little bit of joke. He's saying that Bakunin thought that, babies are born after the second month. Herzen thought babies aren't even born by the 9th month, etc. But Trotsky is saying here that, at a certain time, insurrection has to come forth after a revolution, in an ideal situation, I guess. All right, but continuing here. Moment here is not to be taken too literally as meaning a definite day and hour. Physical births also present a considerable period of uncertainty. Their limits interesting not only to the art of the midwife, but also to the casuistics of the surrogate's court. Between the moment when an attempt to summon an insurrection must inevitably prove premature and lead to a revolutionary miscarriage, and the moment when a favorable situation must be considered hopelessly missed, there exists a certain period. It may be measured in weeks and sometimes in a few months, in the course of which an insurrection may be carried out with more or less chance of success. To discriminate this comparatively short period and then choose the definite moment, now in the more acute sense of the very day and hour, for the last blow, constitutes the most responsible task of the revolutionary leaders. It can, with full justice, be called the key problem, for it unites the policy of revolution with the technique of insurrection. And it is needless to add that insurrection, like war, is a continuation of politics with other instruments. So Trotsky is playing on, the very famous meme quote, war is politics by other means. And he's essentially saying here that it's up to the vanguard party to essentially finally time when an insurrection is necessary, when it has to be done for the revolution to reach its full conclusion and be successful. Very interesting he's saying this right now after the previous chapter that we just read, where literally it was Lenin forcing the majority of the Bolsheviks to go along with the idea that now is the time to strike and overthrow the government. But I think that plays into the idea that there are constantly forces and contradictions in the dialectic that have to be combated against for the subaltern to rise. That's just me getting a bit too philosophical, but that's Marxist philosophy. But I digress. I think that's what he is trying to say. As Marxists, we believe in materialistic dialectics, and even within a revolutionary party, you have counter-revolutionary forces. What happens when the negation meets the negation? Okay, something new is born. Continuing here, intuition and experience are necessary for revolutionary leadership, just as for all other kinds of creative activity. But much more than that is needed. The art of the magician can also successfully rely upon intuition and experience. Political magic is adequate, however, only for epochs and periods in which routine predominates. An epoch of mighty historic upheavals has no use for witch doctors. Here, experience, even illumined by intuition, is not enough. Here you must have a synthetic doctrine comprehending the interactions of the chief historic forces. Here you must have a materialistic method permitting you to discover, behind the moving shadows of program and slogan, the actual movement of social bodies. The fundamental premise of a revolution is that the existing social structure has become incapable of solving the urgent problems of development of the nation. A revolution becomes possible, however, only in case the society contains a new class capable of taking the lead in solving the problems presented by history. The process of preparing a revolution consists of making the objective problems involved in the contradictions of industry and of classes find their way into the consciousness of living human masses. Change this consciousness and create new correlations of human forces. Beautiful paragraph. Mwah. Mwah. Beautiful. Beautiful. I love that. I love that. The ruling classes, as a result of their practically manifested incapacity to get the country out of its blind alley, lose faith in themselves. The old parties fall to pieces. A bitter struggle of groups and cliques prevails. Hopes are placed in miracle or miracle workers. All this constitutes one of the political premises of a revolution, a very important, although a passive one. A bitter hostility to the existing order, and a readiness to venture upon the most heroic efforts and sacrifices in order to bring the country out upon an upward road. This is the new political consciousness of the revolutionary class and constitutes the most important active premise of a revolution. If you're looking for tattoos, bruh, if you're looking for quotes for tattoos, find it in this chapter, man, because those last two paragraphs are beautiful, beautiful. Put a heart around them bitches, man. Continuing here. These two fundamental camps, however, the big property holders and the proletariat, do not exhaust the population of a country. Between them lie broad layers of the petty bourgeoisie, showing all the colors of the economic and political rainbow. The discontent of these intermediate layers, their disappointment with the policy of the ruling class, their revolutionary initiative on the part of the proletariat, constitute the third political premise of a revolution. It is partly passive in that it neutralizes the upper strata of the petty bourgeoisie, but partly also active, for it impels the lower strata directly into the struggle side by side with the workers. Shout out to my guy, Kung Fu Kenny. Kung Fu Kenny up in the live stream. I forgot I made Kung Fu Kenny a commissar, but shout out to him, salute to him. Thank you for sending somebody to the gulag or re-education camp. I appreciate that, good sir. Because what Trotsky is saying here is very, very important. We have to remember that in the dialectics, there are two opposing forces. There are the bourgeoisie and there are the workers, by and large. There are those who have money, capital, influence, power, and then there are those who generate wealth through their labor. And those people are constantly in conflict. And when the bourgeoisie come out and do counter-revolution, when they continue to try to fight back against the demands of the working class, this brings out more people to the side of the masses who demand insurrection and total regime and social change. Continuing here, that these premises condition each other is obvious. The more decisively and confidently the proletariat acts, the better it will succeed in bringing after it the intermediate layer. The more isolated will be the ruling class, and the more acute its demoralization. And, on the other hand, a demoralization of the rulers will pour water into the mill of the revolutionary class. The proletariat can become imbued with the confidence necessary for a governmental overthrow only if a clear prospect opens before it, only if it has had an opportunity to test out in action a correlation of forces that is changing to its advantage, only if it feels above it a far-sighted, firm, and confident leadership. This brings us to the last premise, by no means the last in importance, of the conquest of power. The Revolutionary Party as a tightly welded and tempered vanguard of the class. Beautiful what Trotsky is laying out here, man. Very, very important, man. What he is saying is that, these contradictions, they continue to be heightened. The workers continue to get pressed. But every time there is a movement, every time there is a protest, every time working people actually see their conditions improve because of the struggle that they enter into, this emboldens them. This enlightens them to see that more is actually possible. And so then, This leads to, eventually, a tight-knit group of people becoming the vanguard of the revolution. This is ideally, as Trotsky is laying out here, and this is how he is illuminating what the Bolsheviks are supposed to represent, and they're rising now to their, historical destiny as well. Thanks to a favorable combination of historic conditions, both domestic and international, the Russian proletariat was headed by a party of extraordinary political clarity and unexampled revolutionary temper. Only this permitted that small and young class to carry out a historic task of unprecedented proportions. It is indeed the general testimony of history. The Paris Commune, the German and Austrian revolutions of 1918, the Soviet revolutions in Hungary and Bavaria, the Italian Revolution of 1919, the German crisis of 1923, the Chinese Revolution of 1925 and 1927, the Spanish Revolution of 1931. That up to now, the weakest link in the chain of necessary conditions has been the party. The hardest thing of all is for the working class to create a revolutionary organization capable of rising to the height of its historic task. In the older and more civilized countries, powerful forces work toward the weakening and demoralization of the revolutionary vanguard. An important constituent part of this work is the struggle of the social democrat against Blanquism, by which they designate the revolutionary essence of Marxism. So what Trotsky is saying here is that prior revolutions, such as the Paris Commune and various times when in European history they were this close to having the proletariat rule, they did not have a vanguard party that would actually execute. Okay, they were this close, but they lacked a fundamental thing, a vanguard party to execute the demands of the proletariat. Now, here is my second question to the audience. Here is my second question to the audience. And anybody who answers this question will have their comment read out loud. I will deal with it in good faith if you answer in good faith. My second question to the audience is, does this show some bit of white chauvinism, white supremacist thinking, or blindness that Trotsky mentions all of these revolutions that happened in Europe and not the Haitian Revolution or the several slave revolts that happened throughout the Americas? Is this a valid critique of Marxist theoreticians such as Trotsky, that they name all these unsuccessful European revolts because these people didn't have a vanguard party like Russia was able to develop, but also leaving out the fact that Haiti successfully overthrew the French, beat the British and the Spanish, the strongest empires at the time, to create the first independent black sovereign state in the modern world of nation states? Is this a type of white supremacist thinking, chauvinism, or blindness? What do you think? Anybody who answers that question will have their comment read. Anybody who deals outside of that question will be ignored and probably escorted out of the classroom. Continuing here. Notwithstanding the number of great social and political crises, a coincidence of all the conditions necessary to a victorious and stable proletarian revolution has so far occurred but once in history. In Russia in October 1917, a revolutionary situation is not long-lived. The least stable of the premises of a revolution is the mood of the petty bourgeoisie. At a time of national crises, the petty bourgeoisie follows that class that inspires confidence not only in words but deeds. Although capable of impulsive enthusiasm and even the revolutionary fury, the petty bourgeoisie lacks endurance, easily loses heart under reverses, and passes from elated hope to discouragement. And these sharp and swift changes in the mood of the petty bourgeoisie lend their instability to every revolutionary situation. If the proletarian party is not decisive enough to convert the hopes and expectations of the popular masses into revolutionary action in good season, the flood tide is quickly followed by an ebb. The intermediate strata turn their eyes away from the revolution and seek a savior in the opposing camp. And just as at flood tide the proletariat draws after it the petty bourgeoisie, so during the ebb the petty bourgeoisie draws after it considerable layers of the proletariat. Such is the dialectic of the communist and the fascist waves observable in the political evolution of Europe since the war. Once again, Trotsky is speaking from beyond the grave. He is speaking from beyond the grave. If you don't know, if you're just now joining the live stream, what is the petty bourgeoisie? The petty bourgeoisie are sort of the upper class. Let's think about it as the upper middle class. People who got money, people who got degrees, people who got, certificates, they got property, they got a nice, comfortable living within, liberal bourgeois dictatorship, capitalism, etc. And so what do these people do? They tend to go where the wind blows. And so the petty bourgeoisie can be the deciding factor if an insurrection or a revolution is successful. Because the petty bourgeoisie could go on the side of the proletariat because in a lot of ways they have a lot of similarities with the proletariat. A guy who makes $200,000 a year has a lot more in common with me and I make about $15,000, $20,000 a year. You know what I'm saying? A guy who makes that amount of money has more in common than me than he does with Elon Musk, because we are much closer in proximity when it comes to our wealth in a capitalist system. You get what I'm saying? But yet and still, like Trotsky says, the petty bourgeoisie can be very easily misled and easily disheartened. The petty bourgeoisie can be absolutely embarrassed. The petty bourgeoisie can become absolutely embarrassed and can become disheartened if their candidate doesn't win. This is when you see liberals crying because, Kamala Harris or Hillary Clinton didn't win the election. You get what I'm saying? This is when, you see, petty bourgeois talking heads in political media in America get scared when they see the DSA rise, or when the left is on the insurgent rise. You get what I'm saying? So, yeah, very interesting what Trotsky is saying here. And very interesting how he brings up that the communist and the fascist at different points in European history had the petty bourgeoisie on their side. Think about it. And that's absolutely so fucking necessary for us to think about right now, as we're living in this extremely polarized era in American politics. They say, on one hand, that the people who claim to be socialists in America are just overly educated, white, yuppie liberals who live in urban areas, right? And then on the other hand, the people that are the fascists in America tend to be rich white folks who live out in the suburbs, and they're just on the computer all day typing N-word, 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 and posting about the Jews all the time. In both cases, different stratas, different parts of the petty bourgeoisie. And so, once again, Trotsky is being absolutely so fucking prescient by talking about how both instances of this class of people, the petty bourgeoisie, can go either fucking way. Now, us as the working class, as the proletariat, especially those with class consciousness, will never fall into fascist thinking. We can never do that because we understand that it's reactionary and, frankly, retarded. But still, the petty bourgeois, they're not like us. They're not like us, in the words of Kendrick. Okay? So, shout out to Tiger Really Art. He says, power to the people. Hope the proletariat wins. We will win. It is on our side. But what do you think? I'm asking this because this is a book club. Tiger Lily Art. The question is for you. Do you think that we are living through pre-revolutionary times in America, similar to what was happening in Russia in 1917, before October? Are we living through similar times? Are we living through similar times, or are we far off? Are we far off from that? That is a question for the audience. All right, continuing here. Attempting to ground themselves upon the assertion of Marx that no regime withdraws from the stage of history until it has exhausted all its possibilities, the Mensheviks denied the legitimacy of a struggle for proletarian dictatorship in backward Russia, where capitalism had far from exhausted itself. This argument contained two mistakes, both fatal. Capitalism is not a national, but a worldwide system. The imperialist war and its consequences demonstrated that the capitalist system had exhausted itself on a world scale. The revolution in Russia was a breaking of the weakest link in the system of worldwide capitalism. But the falsity of the Menshevik conception appears also from a national point of view. From the standpoint of economic abstraction, it is indeed possible to affirm that capitalism in Russia has not exhausted its possibilities, But economic processes do not take place in the ether, but in a concrete historical medium. Capitalism is not an abstraction, but a living system of class relations requiring above all things a state of power. That the monarchy, under whose protection Russian capitalism developed, had exhausted its possibilities is not denied, even by the Mensheviks. The February Revolution tried to build up an intermediate state regime. We have followed its history. In the course of 8 months, it exhausted itself completely. What sort of state order could, in these conditions, guarantee the further development of Russian capitalism? The bourgeois republic, defended only by socialists of moderate tendencies, no longer finding any support in the masses, could not maintain itself. Its whole essence had evaporated. These remained only an external shell. This accurate definition belongs to Milikov. The fate of this evaporated system was necessarily, according to his words, the same as that of the Tsarist monarchy. Both prepared the ground for a revolution, and on the day of revolution neither could find a single defender. As early as July and August, Milikov characterized the situation by presenting a choice between two names, Kornilov or Lenin. But Kornilov had now made his experiment, and it had ended in a miserable failure. For anybody joining and doesn't remember or doesn't know who Kornilov was, basically he was this right-wing general who tried to have a military coup in Russia to create a fascist government. Okay, and he was defeated because of his own stupidity and ineptitude. Continuing here. For the regime of Kerensky, who was the former liberal leader of Russia during this time before the revolution, for the regime of Kerensky, there was certainly no place left. With all the varieties of mood, says Sukhanov, the one thing upon which all united was hate for the Kerensky regime. Just as the Tsarist monarchy had toward the end become impossible in the eyes of the upper circle of the nobility and even the Grand Dukes, so the government of Kerensky became odious even to the direct inspirators of his regime, the Grand Dukes of the compromisist upper crust. In this universal dissatisfaction, this sharp political nerve tension of all classes, we have one of the symptoms of a ripe revolutionary situation. In the same way, every muscle, nerve, and fiber of an organism is intolerably tensed just before an abscess burst. Very important what Trotsky is saying here. He's saying that when people are absolutely dissatisfied with the system, that is a symptom that it is prime for revolution and thus insurrection. Very, very important. And I do think this is proof or evidence that we are living through pre-revolutionary times in America, because what is one thing all Americans can agree with? Republicans and Democrats don't give a fuck about you. Republicans and Democrats were on Little St. John. Republicans and Democrats want to fuck your kids, literally. And they will send them to Iraq, they'll send them to Iran, they'll send them to Afghanistan, they'll send them to Cuba, they'll send them to Venezuela to die. Facts. Okay. Anyway, Tiger Lily Art says, yes, there is potential for revolution, but only if the liberals realize capitalism is the root issue. Only if the Democrats don't rely on a bourgeois capitalist leader to save them. Absolutely. Absolutely. I absolutely agree with that. I do think that we do have to destroy the Democrats, though. I think the Democrats cannot continue to exist. The Democrats have to go. Okay, so I appreciate that comment, Lily Arts, but I want to ask you, should the Democrats be entirely destroyed and a new party put in place? I would argue a vanguard revolutionary party with the explicit aim of seizing the state and smashing it, even if we have to hide that fact. Even if we have to hide that fact. The same way Republicans hide the fact they're fucking racist. The same way Republicans hide the fact they're racist, a vanguard party that destroys the Democrats and replaces them can hide the fact that we want to seize the state and smash it. We could just hide it under liberal language. You know, we just want to make something new. We just have ideas for a better and grander future beyond what is right now. Okay? How about we do that? Anyway, so Raccoons161 says, I don't think most people even have the imagination for change, and definitely not in a socialist direction. Do you think differently? Absolutely. I think most people would like to see a world where the amount of work you do does not dictate how little You get? I think we all know people that work hard and don't have 2 pennies to rub together. I think we know of people that have spent a lot of their life trying to get educated and can't find a job. I think we know of people, especially if you're in America, who had one little accident or have been diagnosed with cancer and now they have been doomed to debt slavery. Okay? So yes, I do think people are actually primed and ready for a reimagining of our society. And that is the purpose of propaganda anyway. I am not going to hide the fact that I am a propagandist. I am a proud propagandist for a socialist humanism, a revolutionary mindset of the future. I am not going to hide the fact that that is what I am here to do, at least as far as I'm reading Marxist texts. Now, in the Book to React series, we might read other texts, but all I am trying to do here is the same thing that your teachers did, your church leaders did, your politicians did, your racist-ass, stupid-ass, backward-ass parents did. I am here to shape your fucking mind. And if you don't like it, get the fuck out of here and go back to bourgeois world. But this is revolutionary time, okay? This is revolutionary reading time. And yes, we have radical, revolutionary imaginations. Now I pose the question to you. Why do you lack a revolutionary imagination? What has been taught to you? What type of bullshit has been poured in your ear that stayed stuck between your 2 shoulders that made you think revolution is not possible, a better world is not possible, and we are doomed to debt slavery and American imperialism? Tell me what bullshit went in your head and why you still hold on to it and why you didn't knock it out the other side. All right? Continuing here, Trotsky says, the resolution of the July Congress of the Bolsheviks, while warning the workers against premature encounters, had at the same time pointed out that the battle must be joined. Whenever the general national crisis and the deep mass enthusiasm have created conditions favorable to the going over of the poor people of the city and the country to the side of the workers, that moment arrived in September and October. The insurrection was thenceforth able to believe in its success, for it could rely upon a genuine majority of the people. This, of course, is not to be understood in a formal sense. If a referendum could have been taken on the question of insurrection, it would have been given... If a referendum could have been taken on the question of insurrection, it would have given extremely contradictory and uncertain results. An inner readiness to support a revolution is far from identical with an ability to clearly formulate the necessity of it. Moreover, the answer would have depended to a vast degree upon the manner in which the question was presented, the institution which conducted the referendum, or to put it more simply, the class that held power. Have you ever heard that saying? Lawyers say, don't tell me what the law is, tell me who the judge is, and I'll tell you what the outcome of the case will be. And that's what Trotsky is essentially saying here, is that if you ask people generally, do you want a revolution? Do you want society to fundamentally change? Most people will probably say no. And Trotsky would probably agree, because as Trotsky has said in this book before, in chapters many pages ago, the nature of man is naturally conservative. Most people do not want to change the same way most people do not want war. But we understand that war sometimes is fucking necessary. The same way revolution is fucking necessary. Okay? So yeah, just because people are uncertain about revolution does not mean that revolution is not necessary. Okay? So, Raccoon says, when I transitioned, I lost my job, I lost my housing, and I've ran into a lot of evil on my way down from poor to impoverished. Don't get me wrong, though. I think revolution is inevitable. Well, I'm glad to hear that, Raccoon. And once again, I wasn't trying to, jump down your throat, but sometimes we got to shake some people, man, because so many people come into leftist circles with nihilism, with cynicism, with pessimism. And we understand we're living in dark times. Literally, I'm dark as hell, and all my life has been a dark-ass time. But that doesn't mean we give up on revolutionary possibility. That does not mean that we give up on propaganda. That does not mean we give up on organizing. That does not mean that we give up on theory and praxis. Okay? But I'm glad that you shared your story. I'm sorry all of that happened to you. I wish you all the best. I'm an ally to our trans brothers and comrades, our trans brothers and sisters who are comrades in the struggle. And so I hope that you are able to get back on your feet the same way I hope I'm able to pay the rent this month, because I've been going so hard reading this Marxist lit. I've been going so hard reading this Marxist lit, I ain't even had time to go do some other work that I need to be doing, man. It's real sacrifice to come out here and read these books. You know what I'm saying? It's real sacrifice to do the work that we do on this channel to try to continually push the line of revolutionary propaganda, okay? But nevertheless, you get what I'm saying. Kabuto Citizen says, greetings from Italy. Buongiorno. Buongiorno. Anyway, Raccoon says, now you have the right energy. You got to shake nihilism and cynicism. I was curious what you had to say. I appreciate that, but I'm interested in what you have to say. I'm interested in what you have to say because right now we're thinking about, or Trotsky is laying out, the art of insurrection. So what do you think is the way we are going to actually have revolution in America? Do you think, Raccoon, that it's going to be electoralism, just electing more badass DSA members? Do you think it's going to be Blanquism, all of us nasty, dirty communists get into a dark room and start planning how we're going to overthrow the government? Or do you think it's going to be mass movement where we have workers and people in different sorts of congresses coming together and directing them towards the aim of seizing the state? Okay? That is the question for you. Okay? That is a question for Raccoon and also everybody else who's joining the live stream. Okay? Continuing here. So, the insurrection was thenceforth able to believe in its success, for it could rely upon a genuine majority of the people. This, of course, is not to be understood in a formal sense. If a referendum could have been taken on the question of insurrection, it would have given extremely contradictory and uncertain results. An inner readiness to support a revolution is far from identical with an ability to clearly formulate the necessity of it. Moreover, the answer would have depended to a vast degree upon the manner in which the question was presented, the institution which conducted the referendum, or, to put it more simply, the class that held the power. There is a limit to the application of democratic methods. You can inquire of all the passengers as to what type of car they like to ride in, but it is impossible to question them as to whether to apply the brakes when the train is at full speed and accident threatens. If the saving operation is carried out skillfully, however, and in time, the approval of the passengers is guaranteed in advance. Parliamentary consultations of the people are carried out at a single moment, whereas during a revolution, the different layers of the population arrive at the same conclusion, one after another, and with inevitable, although sometimes very slight, intervals. At the moment when the advanced detachment is burning with revolutionary impatience, the backward layers have only begun to move. In Petrograd and Moscow, all the mass organizations were under the leadership of the Bolsheviks. In Tambov province, which has over 3 million population, that is a little less than both capitals put together, a Bolshevik faction first appeared in the Soviet only a short time before the October Revolution. Go in here to the comments. Raccoon says, the poorest class is transient worker class and they're under attack. I worry social media has pushed people into opportunism when they are transient workers, losing everything right now. That is very true. There have been some Marxist theorists who have said that the proletariat is not the traditional proletariat that, Marx, Engels, Lenin, Trotsky were talking about, factory workers on the shop floor. Nowadays, we are all sort of, atomized, and we are all working very precarious jobs. I forgot who coined the term the precarious proletariat. Basically, all of us are now living under constant uncertainty with our jobs. I'm from the South. I'm from Louisiana, a right-to-work state, similar to Florida and other states in the South. And a right-to-work state doesn't mean you have a right to have a job. It means that the boss has any right to fire you for any fucking reason, under no circumstances, under no reason to explain it. Get your ass out of here, boy. So yeah, we are now living through a situation where many people are transient, if that's what you're meaning they have a job today, might not have it tomorrow, or definitely are on some type of contract where they can get kicked off of the jobs. Yes, it is very different, but I do think that, people have been up against greater odds before. Even though it's not the same proletariat that was existing at the turn of the 20th century or throughout the 19th century, it's still a situation where people are dealing with, extremely harsh conditions. Back then, people worked 16 hours. Back then, people would lose their finger and then just get wrapped up and told, come back to work tomorrow. Walk it off, buddy. You get what I'm saying? He's talking about the 20 million people Trump wants to deport. I would still argue that's a precarious proletariat. And I would still, and to make it further, to go further than that, I would say that, the dependence of modern Western capitalist states upon migrant labor is definitely something that shows the decaying nature of capitalism, because working conditions have degraded so much here in America that the working class no longer even has the means to reproduce itself. At the basis of capitalism, like if you read Adam Smith or something like that, they say that the basis is that you should pay your workers enough so that they are able to reproduce themselves. Marx even repeats this, and now it's gotten so bad, people can't even afford to have children. People can't even afford to live off one job. So yes, now countries are dependent upon, migrant labor from El Salvador and Nicaragua or anywhere in the global south. You get what I'm saying? But I would still argue that's, a part of the precarious proletariat. Once again, I think as Marxists, we should try as much as possible to find unity amongst the different types of workers in the proletarian class by and large. So somebody who is a migrant laborer from Mexico has much more in common with me as an American citizen working in America for $16 an hour, a minimum wage, than I do with Elon Musk. And therefore, we cannot fall into this type of trap of thinking that there's this, division amongst us in the proletarian class that is so fucking ossified and solidified that we start divvying up amongst each other. So yeah, I think broadly, I like to think broadly of the working class. I don't like to think in these disjointed terms. The transient proletariat, people who are citizens, non-citizens, etc., etc. We are all victims of a capitalist struggle. We are all victims of a capitalist system, I would say. But what do you think about that? Do you think, and this is a good question, I guess, for the audience, what do you all think? Do you think that there actually is such a, solidified division amongst the working class that we should make these sort of distinctions? That there are transient proletariat, precarious proletariat, workers of the nation state, and those who are guest workers, etc., etc. You get what I'm saying? I would like to hear from what you have to say about that. But I digress. Continuing here. The syllogism of the objective development are far from coinciding, day by day, with the syllogisms of the thought process of the masses. And when a great practical decision becomes unpostponable in the course of events, that is the very moment when a referendum is impossible. The difference in level and mood of the different layers of the people is overcome in action. The advanced layers bring after them the wavering and isolate the opposing. The majority is not counted up, but won over. Insurrection comes into being at exactly that moment when direct action alone offers a way out of the contradictions. Although lacking the power to draw by themselves the necessary political inferences from their war against the landlords, the peasants had, by the very fact of the agrarian insurrection, already adhered to the insurrection of the cities, had evoked it and were demanding it. They expressed their will not with the white ballot, but with the red cock. Pause, no diddy. A more serious referendum, within those limits in which the support of the peasantry was necessary for the establishment of a Soviet dictatorship. The support was already at hand. The dictatorship, as Lenin answered the doubters, would give land to the peasants and all power to the peasant communities in the localities. How can you, in your right mind, doubt that the peasant would support that dictatorship? In order that the soldiers, peasants, and oppressed nationalities, floundering in the snowstorm of an elective ballot, should recognize the Bolsheviks in action. It was necessary that the Bolsheviks seize the power. Okay? Shout out to Kirkham Down Stalin. Everybody salute Kirkham Down Stalin. He is our top commissar. He has sent more people to the gulag than Stalin himself. He is a legend around these parts. Shout out to Kirkham Down Stalin. He'll send your whole family to a North Korean work camp in an instant if you get out of line. Anyway, Raccoon says, worker solidarity is important, but we're discussing insurrection. Those people are largely stateless and getting rounded up. If we want to seed an insurrection right now, we got to go there, I think. Love the PFP. Okay. I don't know what PFP means, but the thing is, like Trotsky has been saying, insurrection is an art. It's not Blanquist in the sense that, that we have to sit around, profile pic. Oh, yes, the reason Kirkham Down Stalin became a commissar was simply because of that profile pic. I saw the Chris Dorner, I said, that's my nigga. That's my motherfucking nigga. He showed up with the Chris Dorner and he rocking that bitch. You know what I'm saying? That's my dog. For real, for real. Anyway, Yeah, going to the thing about getting the, stateless or undocumented workers on board with an insurrection. I think, once again, this is a longer process that we have to think about. Before the insurrection can happen, before the conspiracy for insurrection can happen, there has to be mobilization of the workers, organization of the workers, councils of workers. You get what I'm saying? We have to have the base laid. And so, if we are going to lay that base, yes, we need to form workers' unions and be in collaboration with those who are undocumented, with those who are, stateless, with those who don't share our nationality within the borders. I'm going to let you all know right now, I am not in America. I am in Budapest, Hungary. And I work legally, and I would also argue probably illegally, for some companies out here teaching English, mostly. And I also do some freelance work writing for a hip-hop website called Culturalist Theory, which all of you should check out. So I know both sides of this. I'm actually on the opposite end of this. I am working now like a Nicaraguan is in America, who has some, his papers are kind of iffy, you know what I'm saying, especially in this Trump era. You get what I'm saying? And at any moment, I could possibly be rounded up because we live under fascism here in Budapest, Hungary. They kicked out the right-wing prime minister and replaced him with another right-wing prime minister. A prime minister so right-wing, they deported my motherfucking wife. Okay, so y'all used to see Acti on this channel. I didn't get rid of Acti. Acti got deported by the government of Hungary. You get what I'm saying? So I'm on both sides of this thing. And so what I'm saying is that even though I'm living in this situation right now in Budapest, Hungary, I still have more in common with the poor working class people here in Budapest than I do with, the rich people who live on the hills of Buda. You get what I'm saying? And I think that's what we need to do. And also, once again, we need to be organized with our workers in solidarity. So before we talk about, having an insurrection with 30,000 wild Guatemalans running up in the White House, like Raccoon is talking about, we need to actually lay the base of being in union and in organization with our Guatemalan, worker comrades. You get what I'm saying? Does that make sense? Does that make sense? I hope I'm not rambling. But I hope I'm making absolute sense when I'm talking about this shit. Anyway, what do y'all think? Once again, this is an open source book club, and this is the ideal Book React live stream where we have people interacting with the topics, with the ideas, with the text, actually dealing in good faith. This is what we are hoping for when we are doing these live streams. And this is why I live for this, man. This is absolutely fun. Okay. Okay, Raccoon says, yeah, I guess that's what that sounds like. You're making sense, though. Okay, I get what you're saying. You know what I'm saying? So, once again, I would still like to encourage all of you out there who are listening, drop your 2 cents in on this. Let's make this an open source discussion. This is an open source book club, okay? Continuing here. But what correlation of forces was necessary in order that the proletariat should seize the power? To have at the decisive moment, at the decisive point, an overwhelming superiority of force, wrote Lenin later, interpreting the October Revolution. This law of military success is also the law of political success, especially in that seething and bitter war of classes that is called revolution. The capitals, or generally speaking, the biggest centers of trade and industry, decide to a considerable degree the political fate of the people. That is, of course, on condition that the centers are supported by sufficient local rural forces, although this support need not be immediate. It was in this dynamic sense that Lenin spoke to the majority of the people, and that was the sole real meaning of the concept of majority. The enemy Democrats comforted themselves with the thought that the people following the Bolsheviks were mere raw material, mere historic clay. The potters were still to be these same Democrats, acting in cooperation with the educated bourgeoisie. Can't those people see, asked a Menshevik paper, that the Petrograd proletariat and garrison were never before so isolated from all other social strata? The misfortune of the proletariat and the garrison was that they were isolated from those classes with whom they intended to take power. So once again, very interesting what they're saying here. The common common criticism of socialists is that we're, disconnected from the people. We don't understand what working people really go through. They were literally saying this about the Bolsheviks right before October. Right before, it's like 2 days away from the world changing, from the bourgeois getting kicked out of power, and Lenin walking in as a black gay trans woman saying, "This house mine, bitch." We were this close to that happening, and literally the bourgeoisie at that time were saying, these socialists, all they do is, work in coffee shops and just read books, and they're disconnected from hard-working people. Literally, is this not the same thing that they're saying right now against all these DSA candidates who are winning right now? And against leftists in general? You don't know what it's really like to work. Nigga, we do. That's why we're communists. Nigga, we do. We po. We po. That's why we communists. You know what I'm saying? We know what it's like to work. Anyway, I digress. But was it really possible to rely upon the sympathy and support of the dark masses in the provinces and at the front? Their Bolshevism, wrote Sukhanov scornfully, was nothing but hatred for the coalition and longing for land and peace. As though that were little, hatred for the coalition meant a desire to take the power from the bourgeoisie. Shout out to Raccoon. No, not Raccoon. It says, Petunia Whale, I'm starving and rich people be looking tasty as fuck. Absolutely, man. Absolutely, man. Tiger Lily says, real. Absolutely, man. They look absolutely delicious, man. Continuing here. Longing for land and peace was the colossal program that the peasant and soldier intended to carry out under the leadership of the workers. The insignificance of the Democrats, even the most leftward, resulted from this very distrust, the distrust of educated skeptics, and those dark masses who grasp a phenomenon wholesale, not bothering about details and nuances. This intellectual, pseudo-aristocratic, squeamish attitude toward the people was foreign to Bolshevism, hostile to its very nature. The Bolsheviks were not lily-handed, literary friends of the masses, not pedants. They were not afraid of those backward strata, now for the first time lifting themselves out of the dregs. The Bolsheviks took the people as preceding history and created them, and as they were called to achieve the revolution, the Bolsheviks saw it as their mission to stand at the head of the people. Those against the insurrection were everybody, except the Bolsheviks. But the Bolsheviks were the people. Now, it's very interesting that Trotsky is making this turn from saying that the Bolsheviks in a previous chapter were like pseudo-egg-headed intellectuals who are out of touch, especially when he was writing the chapter talking about Lenin having to fucking whip the Bolsheviks into actually going along with the revolution, to now the Bolsheviks are standing at the vanguard of the people, and they're, not these wimpy, weak fucking, pseudo-aristocratic, squeamish little fucks. They're like Chad. Like the Bolsheviks suddenly became Chad in this new chapter. I'm wondering how Trotsky got there. Is he making the argument that Lenin single-handedly, transformed the Bolsheviks overnight when he won the vote to go ahead with the insurrection, that now the Bolsheviks just became Chad and they were not the weak little, book nerds before, I guess. But either way, what he's laying out here, I will still take on face value. All right. Kung Fu Kenny says the rich are unseasoned though. I don't know, man. Jeff Bezos be baking under the sun with his botched wife. I don't know, man. He looks tender. I don't know. Jeff Bezos look hella tender, man. Petunia says there's spice at the co-op or stealing from Kroger's. Fuck Kroger's. Damn. What Kroger's do? I mean, we know what Kroger's did. They underpaid people. But damn, that was very specific. Saying fuck Kroger specifically is very, very on point. Damn. Continuing here. The fundamental political force of the October Revolution was the proletariat, and the first place in its ranks was occupied by the workers of Petrograd. In the vanguard of these workers stood the Vyborg district. The plan of the insurrection chose the fundamental proletarian district as the point of departure for its offensive. Compromisers of all shades, beginning with Martov, attempted after the revolution to portray Bolshevism as a soldier movement. the European social democrats grabbed up this theory with delight. But fundamental historic facts were here ignored. The fact that the proletariat was the first to come over to the Bolsheviks, that the Petrograd workers were showing the road to the workers of all countries, that the garrison and front much longer than the workers remained bulwarks of compromise, that the social revolutionaries and Mensheviks created all kinds of privileges for the soldier at the expense of the worker in the Soviet system, struggled against the arming of the workers and incited the soldier against them, that the break in the troops was brought about only by the influence of workers, that at the decisive moment the leadership of the soldiers was in the hands of the workers, and finally that a year later the Social Democrats of Germany, following the example of the Russian colleagues, relied on the soldiers in their struggle against the workers. So we have a lot of new people in here. Some people I have seen before, some people I haven't. I'm going to ask you what I think is the most controversial question of reading the history of the Russian Revolution. The question is, how much should us socialists and communists now propagandize to soldiers and police? I would argue, after reading Trotsky's text, their revolution would not have been possible had they not had soldiers and police coming over to the side of the Soviets. Literally, they had arms and weapons and tactics brought over by soldiers who were disaffected by the war front. Okay? I want to ask that question. Kirkland down Stalin is laughing. He knows he hates this question, but I'm asking you, and this is not me, going mask off right wing. No. It's a serious question because I think this is highly, highly important. And I think a lot of us leftists inherently, have a knee-jerk reaction to say all cops are bastards and fuck the police. You know what I'm saying? And I felt that way most of my life. And I still mostly feel that way. Fuck the police as an institution. Fuck the army as an institution. But not fuck the workers. You know what I mean? The soldiers, the police, they are workers. So I guess the question is, how much should we propagandize to? How much should we depend upon the converting of police and soldiers to our side? As long as they have the right politics. Of course, if they agree, with socialist revolution and a reorganization of society, how much should we propagandize to them? That is the question, a sincere question I ask. Sincere question. Okay. So anyway, by autumn, the right compromisers had ceased even to be able to make speeches in the factories and barracks. But the lefts were still trying to convince the masses of the madness of insurrection. Martov, who in the struggle against the counter-revolutionary offensive in July had found a path to the minds of the masses, was now again serving a hopeless cause. We cannot expect, he himself acknowledged on the 14th of October at a meeting of the Central Executive Committee, we cannot expect the Bolsheviks to listen to us. Nevertheless, he considered it his duty to warn the masses. The masses, however, wanted action and not moral admonition. Even where they did patiently listen to their well-known advisor, they thought their own thoughts as before, as Mislavsky acknowledges. Sukhanov tells how he made an effort in drizzling rain to convince the Putilov men that they could fix things up without an insurrection. Impatient voices interrupted him. They would listen for 2 or 3 minutes and interrupt him, and interrupt again. After a few attempts, I gave it up, he says. It was no use, and the rain was drizzling down on us heavier and heavier. Under that ungracious October sky, the poor left Democrats, even as described in their own writings, look like wet hens. Okay? So Raccoon says they shouldn't be at the center of organizing in reference to police and soldiers. If it takes offering them riches and clout, fuck them. Okay, I understand that. It did seem like Trotsky was making that argument that, the Bolsheviks made concessions for the soldiers to come to their side. I would argue that a lot of people probably in the military already agree with many of our analyses of the system. The rich get richer, the poor get poor. The wars that we fight are needless and senseless and are only for the enrichment of a certain class. You know what I'm saying? I believe that a lot of people already in the police and the military agree with that. But the right-wing propaganda that they're fed all the time from Fox News, and You know, if you go into a military recruiting office, what do they have on in the corner up there? Fox News. You get what I'm saying? So, yeah, they're under constant propaganda. Why can't we propagandize to them as well? I would say that they're a part of the working class. You know, many people that I went to high school with joined the military, not because out of some deep patriotism, but solely because it was the only way for social upward mobility. And I know that's not a total excuse to be a part of the bloodthirsty empire, which is America. But I'm saying that, you know, us working class people decide sometimes to do some things that, you know, we don't actually think about, or we don't have consciousness, class consciousness to actually consider more. You get what I'm saying? So I'm just asking. Once again, the question is to the audience. The question is to the audience. Continuing here. The favorite political argument of the left opponents of the revolution, and this even among the Bolsheviks, was a reference to the absence of fighting enthusiasm among the lower ranks. The mood of the laboring and soldier masses, writes Zinoviev and Kamenev on October 11th, is far from comparable even to the mood that existed before the 3rd of July. This assertion was not unfounded. There was a certain depression in the Petrograd proletariat as a result of waiting too long. They were beginning to feel disappointed even in the Bolsheviks. Can it be that they are going to cheat us too? On October 16th, Rakia, one of the fighting Petrograd Bolsheviks, a Finn by birth, said at a conference of the Central Committee, "Our slogan is evidently already getting a little out of date, for there exists a doubt as to whether we will do the thing for which we are calling. But this weariness of waiting, which looked like listlessness, lasted only up to the first fighting signal." Okay? Okay, ASDF says, guys, don't disrespect Israel. We won't disrespect the Zionist genocidal state. We won't do that. You know, we don't do that around here. You know, we respect everybody's right to kill children. You know, if you want to kill a few babies, go ahead. Nobody's going to disrespect you about that. Okay? Go ahead. Go ahead. You know, bomb innocent civilians and then sell the data to Palantir. Go ahead. Go ahead and do that. You know? Continuing. The first task of every insurrection is to bring the troops over to its side. The chief means of accomplishing this are the general strike, mass processions, street encounters, battles at the barricades. The unique thing about the October Revolution, a thing never before observed in so complete a form, was that, thanks to a happy combination of circumstances, the proletarian vanguard had won over the garrison of the capital before the moment of open insurrection. It had not only won them over, but have fortified this conquest through the organization of the Garrison Conference. It is impossible to understand the mechanics of the October Revolution without fully realizing that the most important task of the insurrection, and the one most difficult to calculate in advance, was fully accomplished in Petrograd before the beginning of the armed struggle. I've been saying this for the past few chapters, I think since we started Volume 3. If you have not read The Art of War by Sun Tzu, you need to read it, because one of the most powerful quotes in Sun Tzu's book is the best victory, the best battle, the best war is one you don't even have to fight. A victory gained where you don't even have to fight is, of course, the best one. And in the words of Kirkendall Stalin, that sounds like a galaxy brain quote. But that's what Trotsky is saying here. They already had the October Revolution before it popped off on October 25th. When they started the Revolutionary Military Council or Committee, when they were already organizing the Soviets to start running the city of Petrograd, when they were challenging openly the power of the bourgeois liberal government, the October Revolution had already happened. And so the one that we imagine in our heads of a bunch of crazy radicals running into the Winter Palace, you know, killing the guards, etc., and just bringing mayhem and anarchy to a large country, that did not happen. The battle was mostly bloodless in October because the hard work had been done. The battle had been won before a shot was even fired. Continuing here. Trotsky says, this does not mean, however, that insurrection had become superfluous. The overwhelming majority of the garrison was, it is true, on the side of the workers. But a minority was against the workers, against the revolution, against the Bolsheviks. This small minority consisted of the best trained elements in the army, the officers, the Junkers, the shock battalions, and perhaps the Cossacks. It was impossible to win these elements politically. They had to be vanquished. The last part of the task of the revolution, that which has gone into history under the name of the October Insurrection, was therefore purely military in character. At this final stage, rifles, bayonets, machine guns, and perhaps cannons were to decide. The party of the Bolsheviks led the way on this road. What were the military forces of the approaching conflict? Boris Sokolov, who directed the military work of the Social Revolutionary Party, says that in the period preceding the overturn in the regiments, all the party organizations except those of the Bolsheviks had disintegrated, and conditions were not at all favorable to the organization of new ones. The mood of the soldiers was tending definitely toward the Bolsheviks, but their Bolshevism was passive, and they lacked any tendency whatever toward active armed movements. Sokolov does not fail to add, 1 or 2 regiments wholly loyal and capable of fighting would have been enough to hold the whole garrison in obedience. Literally all of them, from the monarchist generals to the socialist intelligentsia, wanted only those 1 or 2 regiments, and they would have put down the proletarian revolution. But it is quite true that the garrison, although deeply hostile to the government in its overwhelming mass, was not capable of fighting even on the side of the Bolsheviks. The cause of this lay in the hostile break between the old military structure of the troops and their new political structure. The backbone of a fighting unit is its commanding staff. The commanding staff were against the Bolsheviks. The political backbone of the troops was composed of Bolsheviks. The latter, however, not only did not know how to command, but in the majority of the cases hardly knew how to handle a gun. The soldier crowd was not homogeneous. The active fighting elements were, as always, a minority. The majority of the soldiers sympathized with the Bolsheviks, voted for them, elected them, but also expected them to decide things. The elements hostile to the Bolsheviks in the troops were too insignificant to venture upon an initiative whatever. The political condition of the garrison was thus exceptionally favorable for an insurrection, but its fighting weight was not large. That was clear from the beginning. All right. Roll Claw says, I take them all out. Okay, he is just trolling. Okay, Roll Claw, please be more specific when you're making your comments here, sir. Okay? All right. I hope y'all are enjoying this live stream. I'm actually having a great time. I want people to know that, when we do these live streams, the goal is to read an entire chapter at once. And in volume 3 of Trotsky's work, we are seeing some of the longest chapters. Some of these chapters are like 30 pages, 40 pages, like yesterday's live stream. And I still believe we have like another 20 pages to go just for this chapter alone. So I know some of you are working. I know some of you are, probably at school, bullshitting. Maybe you're doing the laundry or cleaning the house, whatever you're doing, you know what I'm saying? If you got a dip, you don't have to say sorry. You don't have to say you exited. In my classroom, I treat all of you like adults. So if you got to go to the bathroom, you got to go to the bathroom. If you're tired of listening to the rant, you can go do something else. Okay? Just letting you know all of that, because we're gonna be on live maybe for another hour or so. All right, what's up, everybody? We are back to complete chapter 42 of Leon Trotsky's History of the Russian Revolution. We took a quick break. As you know, whenever we have technical difficulties with the vertical live stream, which happens very often, we cut off the stream, take a quick break, and then return to finish off the chapter. We are picking up here where Trotsky is going in detail as to the mindset behind staging the insurrection, which happened on October 25th, if I'm correct with the date. The official October Revolution, the date we have all been waiting for, as Trotsky has been going over day by day, week by week, person by person, event by event, that led up to the inevitable October Revolution. Continuing here. However, it was not necessary to dismiss the garrison entirely from the military count. 1,000 soldiers ready to fight on the side of the revolution were scattered here and there among the more passive mass, and for that very reason, more or less drew it after them. Certain individual units, more happily constituted, had preserved their discipline and fighting capacity. Strong revolutionary nuclei were to be found even in the disintegrating regiments. In the 6th, Reserve Battalion, consisting of about 10,000 men out of 5 companies. The first invariably distinguished itself, being known as Bolshevik almost from the beginning of the revolution and rising to the heights in the October days. The typical regiments of the garrison did not really exist as regiments. Their administrative mechanism had broken down. They were incapable of prolonged military effort, but they were nevertheless a horde of armed men, a majority of whom had been under fire. All the units were united by a single sentiment: overthrow Kerensky as soon as possible, disperse and go home, and institute a new land system. Thus, that completely demoralized garrison was to rally once more in the October days and rattle its weapons suggestively before completely going to pieces. So what Trotsky is saying here is that essentially soldiers who are disaffected by the war and have no will to fight on the front in the trenches are coming back to Russia to fight on behalf of the Soviets, of the Bolsheviks, to get rid of the liberal government, to establish a new land system, and finally put the weapons down. Once again, showing the importance of propagandizing to the military. Continuing here. What force did the Petrograd workers offer from a military point of view? This raises the question of the Red Guard. It is time to speak of this in greater detail, for the Red Guard is soon to come out on the great arena of history. Deriving its tradition from 1905, the Workers' Guard was reborn with the February Revolution and subsequently shared the vicissitudes of its fate. Kornilov, while commander of the Petrograd military district, asserted that during the days of the overthrow of the monarchy, 30,000 revolvers and 40,000 rifles disappeared from the military stores. Over and above that, a considerable quantity of weapons came into the possession of the people during the disarming of the police and by the hands of friendly regiments. Nobody responded to the demand to restore the weapons. A revolution teaches you to value a rifle. The organized workers, however, had received only a small part of this blessing. During the first 4 months, the workers not in any way confronted with the question of insurrection. The workers were not in any way confronted with the question of insurrection during the first 4 months. The democratic regime of the dual power gave the Bolsheviks an opportunity to win a majority in the Soviets. Armed companies of workers formed a constituent part of the militia. This was, however, more form than substance. A rifle in the hands of a worker involves a totally different historic principle than the same rifle in the hands of a student. The possession of rifles by the workers alarmed the possessing classes from the very beginning, since it shifted the correlation of forces sharply to the advantage of the factory. In Petrograd, where the state apparatus, supported by the Central Executive Committee, was at first an indubitable power, the workers' militia was not much of a menace. In the provincial industrial regions, however, a reinforcement of the workers' guard would involve a complete change of all relations, not only within the given plant, but all around it. Armed workers would remove managers and engineers, and even arrest them. Upon resolutions adopted by a factory meeting, the Red Guard would not infrequently receive pay out of the factory exchequer. In the Urals, with their rich tradition of guerrilla fighting in 1905, companies of the Red Guard, led by the old veterans, established law and order. Armed workers almost unnoticeably dissolved the old government and replaced it with Soviet institutions. Sabotage on the part of the property owners and administrators shifted to the workers the task of protecting the plants, the machines, stores, reserves of coal, and raw materials. Roles were here interchanged. The workers would tightly grip his rifle in defense of the factory in which he saw the source of his power. In this way, elements of a workers' dictatorship were inaugurated in the factories and districts some time before the proletariat as a whole seized the state power. Reflecting, as always, the fright of the property owners, the compromisers tried with all their might to oppose the arming of the Petrograd workers or reduce it to a minimum. According to Minichev, all the arms in the possession of the Narva district consisted of 15 or 20 rifles and a few revolvers. At that time, robberies and deeds of violence were increasing in the capital. Alarming rumors were spreading everywhere, heralding new disturbances. On the eve of the July demonstration, revolution, it was generally expected that the district would be set fire to. The workers were hunting for weapons, knocking at all doors, and sometimes breaking them in. The Putilov men brought back a trophy from the demonstration of July 3rd, a machine gun with 5 cases of cartridge belt. We were happy as children, said Minichev. Certain individual factories were somewhat better armed. According to Lichkov, the workers of the factory had 80 rifles and 20 big revolvers. Riches, indeed. Through the Red Guard headquarters, they got 2 machine guns. They put one in the dining room, one in the attic. Our commander, says Lichkov, was Kocharovsky, and his first assistants were Tomchak, who was killed by the White Guards in the October days near Sarko's Selo, and Efimov, who was shot by white bands during Hamburg. These scant words enable us to glance into the factory laboratory, where the cadres of the October Revolution and the future Red Army were forming, where the Tomchaks and Efimovs were being chosen out, tempered, and were learning to command. And with them, those hundreds and thousands of nameless workers who won the power, loyally defended it from its enemy, and fell subsequently on all fields of battle. The July days introduced a sudden change in the situation of the Red Guard. The disarming of the workers was now carried out quite openly, not by admonition, but by force. However, what the workers gave up as weapons was mostly old rubbish. All the very valuable guns were carefully concealed. Rifles were distributed among the most reliable members of the party. Machine guns smeared with tallow were buried in the ground. Detachments of the Guard closed up shop and went underground, closely adhering to the Bolsheviks. The business of arming the workers was originally placed in the hands of the factory and district committees of the party. It was only after the recovery from the July days that the military organization of the Bolsheviks, which had formerly worked only in the garrison and at the front, took up the organization of the Red Guard, providing the workers with military instructors and in some cases with weapons. The prospect of armed insurrection put forward by the party gradually prepared the advanced workers for a new conception of the function of the Red Army. It was no longer a militia of the factories and workers' districts, but the cadres of a future army of insurrection. Very interesting. So what Trotsky is saying here is that workers went through trial by fire. They seized the factories, they seized the land, and then they were fighting to defend what they had now seized from the expropriating capitalist class. They expropriated the exploiters. They expropriated the expropriators. And then they had to defend it. And while the government tried to seize their guns, they still kept to their word that they were going to fight and die on making sure that their way of life would be defended. So they buried the real weapons underground, put a few sticks in the closet, got some sticks at auntie's house, etc., etc. And then they pulled it out when it was ready. All right, continuing here. During August, fires in the shops and factories multiplied. Every new crisis is preceded by a convulsion of the collective mind, sending forth waves of alarm. The factory and shop committees developed an intense labor of defending the plants from attacks of this kind. Concealed rifles came out into the open. The Kornilov insurrection conclusively legalized the Red Guard. About 25,000 workers were enrolled in companies and armed, by no means fully, to be sure, with rifles and in part with machine guns. Workers from the Slushberg powder factory delivered on the Neva a barge full of hand grenades and explosives against Kornilov. The compromisist Central Executive Committee refused this gift of the Greeks. The Red Guards of the Viborg side distributed the gift by night throughout the district. Drill in the art of handling a rifle, says the worker Skorinko, formerly carried on in flats and tenements, was now brought into the light and air, into the parks, the boulevards. The shops were turned into camps, says another worker, Rakitov. The worker would stand at his bench with knapsack on his back and rifle beside him. Very soon, all those working in the bomb factory except the old social revolutionaries and Mensheviks were enrolled in the Guard. After the whistle, all would draw up in the court for drill. Side by side with the bearded worker, you would see a boy apprentice, and both of them attentively listening to the instructor. Thus, while the old Tsarist army was disintegrating, the foundation of a future Red Army was being laid in the factories. As soon as the Kornilov danger passed, the compromisers tried to slow up on the fulfillment of their promises. To the 30,000 Pudilov men, for instance, only 500 rifles were given out. Soon, the giving out of weapons stopped altogether. The danger was not from the right, but the left. Protection must be sought not among the proletariat, but the Junkers. An absence of immediate practical aims combined with the lack of weapons caused an ebbing of workers from the Red Guard, but this only for a short interval. The foundation cadres have been laid down solidly in every plant. Firm bonds have been established between the different companies. These cadres now knew from experience that they had serious reserves that could be brought to their feet in case of danger. The going over of the Soviet to the Bolsheviks again radically changed the position of the Red Guard. From being persecuted or tolerated, it now became an official instrument of the Soviet already reaching for the power. The workers now often found by themselves a way to weapons, asking only the sanction of the Soviet. From the end of September on, and more especially from the 10th of October, the preparation of an insurrection was openly placed on the order of the day. For a month before the revolution, in scores of shops and factories of Petrograd, an intense military activity was in progress, chiefly rifle practice. By the middle of October, the interest in weapons had risen to a new height. In certain factories, almost every last man was enrolled in a company. The workers were more and more impatiently demanding weapons from the Soviet, but the weapons were infinitely fewer than the hands stretched out for them. I came to Smolny every day, relates the engineer Kosmin, and observed how both before and after the sitting of the Soviet, workers and sailors would come up to Trotsky offering and demanding weapons for the arming of the workers, making reports as to how and where these weapons were distributed, and putting the question, but when does business begin? The impatience was very great. So the workers are coming up to Trotsky before the Soviets have even decided, before the Bolsheviks have even decided that insurrection must happen. And the workers are demanding, when do we get to use these guns against our government? When? You get what I'm saying? So once again, this heeds to something that Trotsky is somewhat, going back and forth on in this text, that the workers were more far left than the actual Bolsheviks at the time. Continuing here. Formerly, the Red Guard remained non-party, but the nearer the final day came, the more prominent were the Bolsheviks. They constituted the nucleus of every company. They controlled the commanding staff and the communications with other plants and districts. The non-party workers and left social revolutionaries followed the lead of the Bolsheviks. However, even now, on the eve of the insurrection, the ranks of the Guard were not numerous. On the 16th, Oritsky, a member of the Bolshevik Central Committee, estimated the workers' army of Petrograd at 40,000 bayonets. The figure is probably exaggerated. The resources of weapons remain still very limited. In spite of the impotence of the government, it was impossible to seize the arsenals without taking the road of open insurrection. On the 22nd, there was held an all-city conference of the Red Guard. Its 100 delegates, representing about 20,000 fighters. The figure is not to be taken too literally. Not all those registered had shown any sign of activity. But at a moment of alarm, volunteers would pour into the companies in large numbers. Regulations adopted the next day by the conference defined the Red Guard as an organization of the armed forces of the proletariat for the struggle against counter-revolution and the defense of the conquest of the revolution. Observe this, that 24 hours before the insurrection, the task was still defined in terms of defense and not attack. Basically, Trotsky is saying here that we are here to defend the revolution of February, not to, try to overthrow this government. Wink, wink, wink. I got something in my eye. We know what the real deal is. But by and large, it's both true and untrue. In politics, you have to speak truth and untruth at the about topics. You get what I'm saying? And the thing is, they were being truthful in that they were defending the revolution because even the bourgeois were saying that. And secondly, they were being untruthful because it had already been decided they were going to overthrow the government. Shout out to Shaista Chanel, who says, hello, sir, I'm back. Once again, do not call me sir, call me comrade. And I assume, Shaista Chanel, that you're from India. I assume, Shaista Chanel, you're from India because of your name and how you're speaking to me. So my question for you, Shaista Chanel, is that there are two Marxist parties in India. Which one actually is the good one? Tell me. If you're from India, you're not from India, he says. Either way, we are here to talk about Trotsky's book, and Marxism. I would ask you then, wherever you're from, would you support a Marxist party in your country? Would you vote for a Marxist party in your country? Would you volunteer or donate to a Marxist party in your country? That is the question. And if no, why not? If yes, why? Continuing here. The basic military unit was the 10. 4 tens was a squad. 3 squads, a company. 3 companies, a battalion. With its commanding staff and special units, a battalion numbered over 500 men. The battalions of a district constituted a division. Big factories like the Putilov had their own divisions. Special technical commands, sappers, bicyclers, telegraphers, machine gunners, and artillerymen were recruited in the corresponding factories and attached to the riflemen, or else acted independently according to the nature of the given task. The entire commanding staff was elective. There was no risk in this. All were volunteers here and knew each other well. The working women created Red Cross divisions. At the shops, manufacturing surgical supplies for the army, lectures were announced on the care of the wounded. Already, in almost all the factories, writes Tatiana Graf, the working women were regularly on duty as nurses with the necessary first aid supplies. The organization was extremely poor in money and technical equipment. By degrees, however, the factory committees sent material for hospital bases and ambulances. During the hours of the revolution, these weak nuclei swiftly developed, and imposing technical equipment was suddenly found at their disposal. On the 24th, the Viborg District Soviet issued the following order. Immediately requisition all automobiles, take an inventory of all first aid supplies, and have nurses on duty in all clinics. Shaista Chanel says she doesn't know or he doesn't know what Marxist means. Okay, then Shaista, I think I might have to ignore your comments then. I don't know what to say to you, man. I don't know what to say to you. I don't know why you came around here then. What are you doing around here, buddy? If we're reading Marxist text and you don't even know what it means, what do you want me to do? Hold your hand and explain it to you? Nope, can't do that. That's what Google is for. Continuing here. A growing number of non-party workers were now going out for shooting drill and maneuvers. The number of posts requiring patrol duty was increasing. In the factories, sentries were on duty day and night. The headquarters of the Red Guard were transferred to more spacious rooms. On the 23rd, at a pipe foundry, they held an examination of the Red Guard. An attempt of a Menshevik to speak against the insurrection was drowned in a storm of indignation. Enough, enough. The time for argument is past. The movement was irresistible. It was seizing even the Mensheviks. They were enrolling in the Red Guard, says Tatiana Graf, participating in all duties and even developing some initiative. Skorinko tells how, on the 23rd, social revolutionaries and Mensheviks, old and young, were fraternizing with the Bolsheviks, and how Skorinko himself joyfully embraced his own father, who was a worker in the same factory. The worker Peskovoy says that in his armed detachment, there were young workers of 16 and old men of 50. The variety of ages gave good cheer and fighting courage. All right. Shaista Chanel says, supporting people, man, I appreciate that. I appreciate your support, but I would appreciate you supporting by contributing to the conversation. So I guess I'll ask you, in your country, wherever it is, do rich people have more economic and political power and influence than they deserve? How about that? Let's start with the basics. Wherever you are in the world, do rich people essentially run the show? Answer that. If yes, why? Or why do you think so? And if no, why not? Or why do you think not? Continuing here. The Viborg side was especially fervent in preparing for battle. Having stolen the keys of the drawbridges, studied out the vulnerable points of the district, and elected their military revolutionary committee. The factory committees established continuous patrols. Kayarov writes with legitimate pride of the Viborg men. They were the first to go to battle with the autocracy, and they were the first to institute in their district the 8-hour day. The first to come out with a protest against the 10-minister capitalists, the first to raise a protest on July 7th against the persecution of our party, and they were not the last on the decisive day of October 25th. What is true is true. The history of the Red Guard is to a considerable extent the history of the dual power. With its inner contradictions and conflicts, the dual power helped the workers to create a considerable armed force, even before the insurrection. To cast up the general total of the workers' detachments throughout the country at the moment of insurrection is hardly possible, at least at the present moment. In any case, tens of thousands of armed workers constituted the cadres of the insurrection. The reserves were almost inexhaustible. Okay? Mr. Kitty says, remember me after a year or two. That name sounds very familiar because it's very disturbing. It is very disturbing. So I will ask Mr. Kitty, after a year or two, do you think that we are living through pre-revolutionary times in the West? Do you think that we are living in times very similar to 1917 Russia, when, basically there was a warmongering empire, an exploitative class that was taking advantage of people, and things were getting worse for the average working person, whether they be in a rural or urban setting? Do you think we are living through similar times? If so, why? If not, why not? Okay? I will pose that question. Any questions not related to my topic or the book will not be answered, and you will be escorted out of here. Mr. Kitty says he doesn't live in America. In your country, do you think you are living through times where rich people are getting richer, poor people are getting poorer, living conditions are getting harder, things are getting more expensive? Do you think you are witnessing that? If yes, if that is happening, why do you think it is? If it's not happening, why not? I would like a full answer. If you do not answer, you will be quickly escorted out of here, okay? So, continuing here, Trotsky is basically saying that more and more people are signing up to the Red Guard, and that they are a fluid organization, a sort of amorphous organization where people are able to come in and out easily, sort of like a guerrilla fighting force. The organization of the Red Guard remained, of course, extremely far from complete. Everything was done in haste, in the rough, and not always skillfully. The Red Guard men were in the majority little trained. The communications were badly organized. The supply system was lame. The sanitary corps lagged behind. But the Red Guard, recruited from the most self-sacrificing workers, was burning to carry the job through, this time to the end. And that was the decisive thing. The difference between the workers' divisions and the peasant regiments was determined not by the social ingredients of the two. Many of those clumsy soldiers, after returning to their villages and dividing the landlord's land, will fight desperately against the White Guards, first in guerrilla bands and afterward in the Red Army. Beside the social difference, there existed another more immediate one. Whereas the garrison represented a compulsory assemblage of old soldiers defending themselves against war, the divisions of the Red Guard were newly constructed by individual selection on a new basis and with new aims. Okay, so very interesting what Trotsky is saying here. He's essentially saying that, they were able to get two different bands of people who wanted to carry arms and fight for this revolution, but with two different aims. The soldiers didn't want to go back to the trenches of World War I, and the Red Guard did not want to go back to wage slavery. Very interesting. The Military Revolutionary Committee had at its disposal a third kind of armed force, the sailors of the Baltic Fleet. In their social ingredients, they are far closer to the workers than the infantry are. There are a good many Petrograd workers among them. The political level of the sailors is incomparably higher than that of the soldiers, in distinction from the none too belligerent reserves who have forgotten all about rifles. These sailors have never stopped actual service. For active operations, it was possible to count firmly upon the armed Bolsheviks, upon the divisions of the Red Guard, upon the advanced group of the sailors, and upon the better preserved regiments. The different elements of this collective army supplemented each other. The numerous garrisons lacked the will to fight. The sailor detachments lacked numbers. The Red Guard lacked skill. The workers, together with the sailors, contributed energy, daring, and enthusiasm. The regiments of the garrison constituted a rather inert reserve, imposing in its numbers and overwhelming in its mass. In contact as they were from day to day with workers, soldiers, and sailors, the Bolsheviks were aware of the deep qualitative difference between the constituent parts of this army they were to lead into battle. The very plan of the insurrection was based to a considerable degree upon a calculation of these differences. The possessing classes constituted the social force of the other camp. This means that they were its military weakness. These solid people of capital, the press, the pulpit, where and when have they ever fought? They are accustomed to find out by telegraph or telephone the results of the battles that settle their fate. The younger generation, the sons, the students, they were almost all hostile to the October Revolution. But the majority of them too stood aside. They stood with their fathers awaiting the outcome of the battle. A number of them afterward joined the officers and junkers, already largely recruited from among the students. The property holders had no popular masses with them. The workers, soldiers, peasants had turned against them. The collapse of the compromise parties meant that the possessing classes were left without an army. In proportion to the significance of railroads in the life of modern states, a large place was occupied in the political calculations of both camps by the question of the railroad workers. Here, the hierarchical constitution of the personnel leaves room for an extraordinary political variegation, creating favorable conditions for the diplomats of the compromisers. The lately formed Vic Zell had kept a considerably more solid root among the clerks and even among the workers than, for instance, the Army Committee at the front. In the railroads, only a minority followed the Bolsheviks, chiefly workers in the stations and yards. According to the reports of Schmidt, one of the Bolshevik leaders of the trade union movement, the railroad workers of the Petrograd and Moscow junctions stood closest of all to the party. But even among the compromisist mass of clerks and workers, there was a sharp shift to the left from the date of the railroad strike at the end of September. Dissatisfaction with the Vic Zell, which had compromised itself by talking and wavering, was more and more evident in the lower ranks. Lenin remarked, "The army of railroad and postal clerks continues in a state of sharp conflict with the government." From the standpoint of the immediate tasks of the insurrection, that was almost enough. Things were less favorable in the post and telegraph service. According to the Bolshevik Boki, the men in the post and telegraph offices are mostly cadets. But here too, the lower personnel had taken a hostile attitude toward the upper ranks. There was a group of mail carriers ready at a critical moment to seize the post office. It would have been hopeless in any case to try to change the minds of the railroad and postal clerks with words. If the Bolsheviks should prove indecisive, the advantage would remain with the cadets and the compromisist upper circles. With the decisive revolutionary leadership, the lower ranks must inevitably carry with them the intermediate layers and isolate the upper circles of the Vic Zell. In revolutionary calculations, statistics alone are not enough. The coefficient of living action is also essential. The enemies of the insurrection in the ranks of the Bolshevik Party itself found, however, sufficient ground for pessimistic conclusions. Zinoviev and Kamenev gave warning against an underestimation of the enemy's forces. Petrograd will decide, and in Petrograd the enemy has considerable forces, 5,000 junkers, magnificently armed and knowing how to fight, and then the army headquarters, and then the shock troops, and then the Cossacks, and then in considerable parts of the garrison, and then a very considerable quantity of artillery spread out fan-wise around Petrograd. Moreover, the enemy, with the help of the Central Executive Committee, will almost certainly attempt to bring troops from the front. The list sounds imposing, but it is only a list. If an army as a whole is a copy of society, then when society openly splits, both armies are copies of the two warring camps. The army of the possessors contain the wormholes of isolation and decay. The officers crowding the hotels, restaurants, and brothels have been hostile to the government ever since the break between Kerensky and Kornilov. Their hatred of the Bolsheviks, however, was infinitely more bitter. As a general rule, the monarchist officers were more active on the side of the government. Dear Kornilov and Krymov, in what you failed to do, perhaps with God's help, we shall succeed. Such was the prayer of Officer Sinagub, one of the most valiant defenders of the Winter Palace on the day of the uprising. But in spite of the vast number of officers, only single individuals were really ready to fight. The Kornilov plots had already proven that these completely demoralized officers were not a fighting force. The Junkers were not homogeneous in social makeup, and there was no unanimity among them. Along with hereditary fighters, sons and grandsons of officers, there were many accidental elements gathered up under pressure of war needs even during the monarchy. The head of an engineering school said to an officer, "I must die with you. We are nobles, you know, and cannot think otherwise." These lucky gentlemen, who did after all succeed in evading a noble death, would speak of the democratic junkers as low breeds, as moozhiks with coarse, stupid faces. This division into the blue blood and the black penetrated deeply into the junker schools, and it is noticeable that here too, those who came out most zealously in defense of the Republican government were the very ones who most mourned the loss of the monarchy. The Democratic junkers declared that they were not for Kerensky, but for the Central Executive Committee. The revolution had first opened the door of the junker schools to the Jews, and in trying to hold their own with the privileged upper circles, the sons of the Jewish bourgeoisie became extraordinarily warlike against the Bolsheviks. But, alas, this was not enough to save the regime, not even to defend the Winter Palace. The heterogeneousness of these military schools and their complete isolation from the army brought it about that during the critical hours, the junkers began to hold meetings. They began to ask questions. How are the Cossacks behaving? Is anybody coming out beside us? Is it worthwhile anyway to defend the provisional government? According to a report of Podovsky, there were about 120 socialist junkers in the Petrograd military schools at the beginning of October. And of these, 42 or 43 were Bolsheviks. The junkers say that the whole commanding staff of the school is counter-revolutionary. They are being definitely prepared in case anything happens to put down the insurrection. The number of socialists, and especially Bolsheviks, was wholly insignificant, but they made it possible for Smolny to know everything of importance that went on among the junkers. In addition to that, the location of the military schools was very disadvantageous. The junkers were sandwiched in between the barracks, and although they spoke scornfully of the soldiers, they looked upon them with a great deal of dread. Very interesting. These junkers are basically the final soldiers who believe in the old regime. And a lot of them are the sons of officers. They believe that they're nobles, but the upper nobles look down on them. And even some of the Jews, and Jews were heavily oppressed in Russia at this time, getting slaughtered in pogroms every year or so. Even some of the Jewish bourgeoisie who joined in the junkers were not for the revolution that would ultimately lead to more Jewish emancipation, at least initially. They were actually anti. It's very similar to Black MAGA. It's very similar to Latinos for Trump. It's very similar for Jews for Trump, etc., etc. It's always people who don't see that their material interest is actually on the left, actually with the socialists, instead of with the right wing that they wish so badly to identify with because they've been locked out of power for so long. But I digress. The junkers had plenty of ground for caution. Thousands of hostile eyes were watching them from the neighboring barracks and the workers' districts. This observation was the most effective in that every school had its soldier group, neutral in words but in reality inclining toward the insurrection. The school storerooms were in the hands of non-combatant soldiers. Those scoundrels, writes an officer of the engineering school, not satisfied with losing the key to the storeroom, so that I had to give order to break in the door, also removed the breech blocks from the machine guns and hid them somewhere. In these circumstances, you could hardly expect miracles of heroism from the junkers. But would not a Petrograd insurrection be threatened from without, from the neighboring garrisons? In the last days of its life, the monarchy had never ceased to put its hope in that small military ring surrounding the capital. The monarchy had missed its guess, but how would it go this time? To guarantee conditions excluding every possible danger would have been to make the very insurrection unnecessary. After all, its aim was to break down the obstacles that could not be dissolved politically. Everything could not be calculated in advance, but all that could was. Once again, Trotsky's making the argument that this is a science, and while not everything is totally predictable, you have to follow along with the birth of this baby. Remember, Trotsky compared revolution to sex and insurrection to birth after pregnancy, and that's exactly what we are talking about here. So King Mike is coming in with reactionaryism, with bourgeois thinking. King Mike says, what country is successful with socialism? America. America is successful with socialism. We give billions to the bankers. We give billions to mega corporations. We give billions to farmers to not grow food and throw food away. We give billions to the police. We give billions to rural hospitals. America is very successful with socialism, especially socialism for rich people, especially when we don't make them pay taxes. Now, if you're talking about a country that's trying to build socialism for workers, Vietnam has been successful, Cuba has been successful, and many other countries that have been striving to build socialism have been successful. It's just the ones that have not been able to have the highest standards of living or the highest human development index, as the Europeans like to say, is because they have been viciously maligned and attacked by the Western powers, who also implement socialism for their own benefit. So I want everybody to know, if you're listening right now, and you ever hear this counter-revolutionary bullshit bourgeois argument, what country is acceptable? If you ever hear that, just reply America. Because Trump, with the big beautiful bill, just gave socialism to his bourgeois buddies. He just gave away billions of dollars to people that are unproductive in our society. Elon Musk just became a trillionaire because of socialism, because of our hard-earned tax dollars. Our hard-earned tax dollars made Elon Musk a billionaire, not because he provides any value. Rockets go into space, doesn't pick up the trash from the street. Rockets that can go back to the moon and then up your ass and then back down to Earth don't help you if you have a heart condition. They don't do anything like that. But apparently he deserves all of our tax money to the point that he gets to become a billionaire. So America is very successful with socialism. Very, very successful. Okay. Oh, my back hurts. Fuck. Shit. Oh, my God. I can't wait to go to the gym later, man. Anyway, I will continue here. Early in October, a conference of the Soviets of Petrograd province was held in Kronstadt. Delegates from the garrisons of the environs of the capital, Gatchina, Sarko, Krasno, Oranienbaum, Kronstadt itself, took the very highest note set by the tuning fork of the Baltic sailors. Their resolution was adhered to by the deputies of Petrograd province. The Muziks were veering sharply through the left social revolutionaries toward the Bolsheviks. At a conference of the Central Committee on the 16th, a party worker in the province, Sapatnov, let's put this person here, okay. At a conference of the Central Committee on the 16th, a party worker in the province, Stepanov, drew a somewhat variegated picture of the state of the forces, but nevertheless with a clear predominance of Bolshevik colors. In Sestroretsk and Kolpino, the workers are under arms. Their mood is militant. In Novi Peterhof, the work in the regiment has fallen off. The regiment is disorganized. In Krasno Selo, the 176th Regiment is Bolshevik, the same regiment that patrolled the Tarai Palace on July 4th. The 176th is on the side of the Bolsheviks, and besides, there is cavalry there. In Luga, the garrison of 30,000, after swinging over to the Bolsheviks, is wavering in part. The Soviet is still defensist. In Gadov, the regiment is Bolshevik. In Kronstadt, the mood has declined. The garrison boiled over during the preceding months. The better part of the sailors are in the active fleet. In Schlussburg, within 60 versts of Petrograd, the Soviet long ago became the sole power. The workers of the powder factory are ready at any moment to support the capital. In combination with the results of that Kronstadt Conference of Soviets, this information about the first-line reserves may be considered entirely encouraging. The radiation of the February insurrection had been sufficient to dissolve the discipline over a wide area, and it was now possible to look with confidence upon the nearby garrisons, their condition being adequately known in advance. The troops of Finland and the Northern Front were among the second-line reserves. Here, conditions were still more favorable. The work of Smilga, Antonov, Dybenko had produced invaluable results. Along with the garrison of Helsingfors, the fleet had become a sovereign in Finnish territory. The government had no more power there. The two Cossack divisions, quartered in Helsingfors, Kornilov had intended them for a blow at Petrograd, had come in close contact with the sailors and were supporting the Bolsheviks, or the left social revolutionaries, who in the Baltic fleet were becoming less and less distinguishable from Bolsheviks. Go into the comments here. So Enigma is being very racist. Being very, very racist here. If you are not here to actually discuss the text, if all you are going to do is make comments in relation to my blackness, my sexy melanatedness, and my ties to a great people who have overcome so much in a disparaging way, as if all I can do is entertain and tap dance for you, you will be quickly sent to the re-education camp. Consider that a warning. Other than that, after this warning, you will be quickly sent to the gulag. Okay? Helsingfors was extending its hand to the sailors of the Reval naval base, whose attitude up to that time had been indefinite. The Congress of Soviets of the northern region, in which also apparently the Baltic fleet had taken the initiative, had united the Soviets of the garrisons surrounding Petrograd in such a wide circle that it took in Moscow on one side and Archangel on the other. In this manner, writes Antonov, the idea was realized of armoring the capital of the revolution against possible attacks from Kerensky's troops. Smilga returned from the Congress to Helsingfors to organize a special detachment of sailors, infantry, and artillery to be sent to Petrograd at the first signal. The Finland flank of the Petrograd insurrection was thus protected to the last degree. On this side, no blow was to be expected, only strong help. On other portions of the front, too, things were wholly favorable, at least far more favorable than the most optimistic of the Bolsheviks in those days imagined. During the October Committee, elections were held throughout the army, and everywhere they showed a sharp swing to the Bolsheviks. In the corps, quartered near Dvinsk, the old reasonable soldiers were completely snowed under in the elections to the regimental and company committees. Their places were taken by gloomy, gray creatures with angry, piercing eyes and wolfish snouts. The same thing happened in other sectors. Committee elections are in progress everywhere, and everywhere only Bolsheviks and defeatists are elected. The governmental commissars began to avoid making trips to their units. Their situation is now no better than ours. We are quoting Baron Budberg, 2 cavalry regiments of his corps, the Hussar and Ural Cossacks, who remained longest of all in the control of the commanders, and had not refused to put down mutinous units, suddenly changed color, and demanded that they be relieved of the function of punitive troops and gendarmes. The threatening sense of this warning was clear to the Baron and to everybody else. You can't command a flock of hyenas, jackals, and sheep by playing on a violin, he wrote. The only salvation lies in a mass application of the hot iron. And here follows the tragic confession. A thing that we haven't got is nowhere to be gotten. Okay? Shout out to I Am the Bars. He says, do I need mods? Yes, I do need commissars. We do not call people moderators here. We call them commissars. So if you want to be a part of the People's Republic of this channel, I want to ask you, I Am the Bars, a quick qualifying question to see if you are able to have the power of being a commissar, to send people to the re-education camp or the gulag. I want to ask you a question you can answer in this way. What are the 3 fundamental Marxist texts not written by Marx that you think every leftist should read? What are the 3 fundamental texts that you think every Marxist should read, not written by Marx? Or what are 3 texts that you have read from Marxists that are critical of capitalism and imperialism, that you have read that changed your worldview? If you can answer that question, I am the bars. And also this question is open to anybody who wants to become a commissar, aka a moderator here. If you answer that question in good faith, and we will be able to tell if you answer in good faith, you will have the power of life and death in your hands. I will give you that power to, summarily execute fascists and reactionaries. All right, we have to send, once again, a person to the re-education camp, once like that. Okay? Shout out to Young Propane. who's saying, can he have some? You can have some re-education as well. You can have re-education as well. All of you can have re-education. All right. So Kirkham down Stalin, he's already a commissar, but he wanted to contribute. He's a hardcore Stalinist. Our guy is a hardcore Stalinist right here. He says, on contradiction, dialectical and historical materialism, the national question by Stalin. Okay, I think, are all of those texts by Stalin? I'm sure there are some other ones I could have said. On contradiction. On contradiction is by Mao, right? On contradiction is by Mao. Dialectical and historical materialism is Lenin. And the national question by Stalin? Yeah, on contradiction is Mao. I don't know dialectical and historical materialism. Is that Marx? Because the question is a text not written by Marx. I think that has to be Lenin. Dialectical and historical materialism. Or is that Huey P. Newton? But the thing about me, the most influential Marxist texts I read are from, Huey P., Angela Davis, Asada Shakur, you know what I'm saying? Those are the, dialectical and historical materialism is Stalin too. Okay. All right. So yeah, I am the bars, says he wants to be a commissar. If you want to be a commissar, okay, answer the question that I posed to you, I am the bars. If you do not answer that, you will not have commissar powers, ever. Okay? Yeah. And to Kirkham down Stalin, the books that you listed, do you think those are fundamental texts that every Marxist should read? Or are those the ones that opened up your eyes the most and gave you class consciousness? Okay? There's a lot of good stuff by Huey too. You know what I mean? Yes, absolutely. Huey is probably, if you're going to ask me what type of Marxist I am, I'm a Newtonist. I'm a Newtonist, okay? I'm a Marxist, Leninist, Newtonist. Because I think Huey had a lot of very, very interesting contributions to give to Marxism and its development, such as revolutionary intercommunalism and things like that. He was thinking way beyond the idea of seizing the state and smashing it. It's more a bit of like autonomism and anarchism mixed in with, traditional Marxist-Leninist thought. It's very interesting, man. I really love Newton's, theory. And also praxis. You get what I'm saying? Like, when we think about, Marxists, who else in America comes close to Huey Newton and Bobby Seale? You know what I'm saying? Outside of, maybe people like, oh my God. Who was the guy that led the CPUSA? His name's William Z. Foster. Outside of William Z. Foster, you know what I'm saying? Who else put more praxis than Huey P. Newton, Bobby Seale, Fred Hampton? You get what I'm saying? All right, we have Elon Musk coming in with bourgeois black capitalism. What do we do about? I don't know how to. This is my first time. I don't know how we deal with people like Elon Musk. Elon Musk is very funny because this is my first black capitalist up in here. Kirkham down Stalin. I'm gonna ask my guy. Do not ban Elon Musk. Do not ban Elon Musk. Don't send him to the re-education camp yet unless he gets out of pocket. I want to know what should be the protocol here to deal with black capitalists. That we could just buy our way to freedom. Hey guys, if we just need to boycott. Guys, if we just boycott Target, we'll get national liberation. Okay? Somebody let me know. Hey, let me ask Bartek. Before Kirkham down Stalin. Before you ban Bartek, I want to ask him this. We're going to get it clear from him. Because this is going to be a way. This is going to be the way to make sure that we know where people stand. So Bartek is saying that, Marxist revolution, the Soviet revolution killed millions of people. Okay, Bartek, how many people died to build American capitalism through the transatlantic slave trade? And was that worth it to build America? Bartek, answer that question since you are from Russia, Tovarish. If you're from Russia, Tovarish, I want you to answer that. You can Google it, you can AI it, but let me ask you, since you're so upset about millions of people that died to build Soviet communism, which was so damn bad, should I still be upset that capitalism was built off the back of my ancestors who were raped, murdered, tortured, thrown into the sea, worked to death, bred like animals. Okay? Tell us that. Tell us that. Tell us that. All right? Bartek, once Bartek answers that question, he can stay if he answers in good faith. If he doesn't answer in good faith, kirk him down, Stalin. I want you to sit him down on his knees and execute him. Execute him, okay? In the back of the joint, okay? You hear that? All right. Anyway, Elon Musk says, I do not believe in boycotting. Are you familiar with Dr. Boyce Watkins? We are very familiar with Dr. Boyce Watkins on this channel. We are very familiar with all of the black capitalists. We are very familiar with earn your leisure liberation. You niggas are so fucking funny, bro. Like, people like Elon Musk who are like, you know what we need to do, brother? We just need to circulate the black dollar in the community. Instead of buying Jordans, how about you buy some black Jordans, some Bordens? Okay, all right, kirk him down, Stalin. We got our answer from Bartek. Shoot that man in the back of the head. Bow, knock his joint out. Let's go. Send that motherfucker to heaven. Send him to the gulag. Let's go. Get his ass out of here. Anyway, people like Elon Musk are very funny, man. I wonder, Elon Musk, I'm asking you in all sincerity, since you're a black capitalist, I want to ask you, let's say, hypothetically, I want to ask you, Elon Musk, hypothetically, we get our black independent nation. We get our black independent nation. Are we still going to have a rich class of people who essentially fuck us over, who fuck us in the ass, who pay us $9 an hour, who got us, working 3 or 4 jobs, trying to pay the bills, who got us out here paying for healthcare, paying for housing, paying for our retirement? Do you have us living like that still as wage slaves in the black capitalist utopia where we're circulating the black dollar, brother? I want to know. I sincerely want to know how these black capitalists think. I really want to know, because y'all are funny. Y'all are the funniest people. You get what I'm saying? I love all black people, you know what I'm saying? But if you a black capitalist in the big 2026, bro, I don't know what to do with you, my guy. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to react, bro. I mean, shit. I don't know, man. Anyway. Okay. I do not believe jobs will even exist in that time. AI will take over. Okay, then still, do you think we will still? This thing just talking about AI. Okay, so we got AI, and now we're all fucked. So now there's no black liberation because it's all Chat GPT. Let me know, my guy. I really want to know how y'all think. So AI takes over, and what? Black people just die? We just die? What do we do? It's the big 2026 in our imagination as black folks is Dr. Claude Anderson and Boyce Watkins. And still they love Dr. They love Dr. Claude Anderson and Boyce Watkins, and still at the same time they love the aesthetics of the Black Panther Party. The Black Panther Party, the radical Marxist socialist Black Panther Party is their aesthetics, but their whole demeanor is Cleflo dollar. Circulate your dollar, brother. He says we invest in it. So we put it in the, okay, oh Lord. I'm dying, bro. I don't know. It's like me. I don't know how to feel, bro. Kirk him down. He said it's Unk mindset. It's worse than that. Hey, Unk in this case, UNC stands for you niggas never considered. You niggas not in capitalism. Unk mindset means you niggas are not communist. You niggas are still like in the last century. My God, we still talking about black power economics, brother. That's what we doing. Okay, I'm gonna stop teasing. I'm teasing. Okay. Oh my God, Elon Musk is. Oh Lord, I'm gonna have a heart attack. Oh. What Red Fox used to say on Sanford and Son. Oh, this the one. Oh God, this nigga say he white. This nigga white doing black capitalist talking points. My God, the bots are out of control. Oh shit. Damn. Oh my God. Oh my God, Elon Musk, and he got the whole black face. I'm glad we got a blackfisher out in the open. I'm glad a blackfisher just got caught. You know what I'm saying? I usually eat catfish, but for today we'll do with the blackfish. Okay, we're glad the blackfishing. So Elon Musk, I'm gonna politely ask you to leave the live stream. I'm gonna ask you to go back to your regular programming. You know, continuing to say, well, as a black man, I believe the Trump administration has been doing great. I need you to go to like some other videos, some other live stream, and continue your blackfishing bot fascist activities elsewhere. We don't deal with that over here. You will be summarily executed if you continue to derail the conversation. It was fun while it lasted. It was very funny. But, you know, I politely ask you to leave before my top commissar, you know, sends you to the land of Siberia where you will make big rocks into little rocks until your back break. Okay. Please leave. Okay. So that we don't have to resort to, escorting you out. Okay. But it was fun. You were a very fun guest, but, you know, please see the door, okay? All right, we only have a few more pages left. We actually only have a page and a half left. So we're going to read this. We're going to read this and then call it a day. All right, Trotsky is giving, the insight of, damn, we are on page 1,000. We are on page 1,000. Everybody take a shot, man. Can you believe it? No, fuck that. Fuck water. We are literally on page 1,000 in the PDF. If you're looking on the horizontal live stream, it says 1,000 at the top. Bruh, we popping a bottle, bruh. I did not think it would take this motherfucking... I didn't know it would go by this quick, man. This has been my summer reading. I'm very happy to have done it on live with all of y'all. We're nearing the end of this gargantuan book. We still have about 5 or 6 chapters to go. But literally, we are on page 1,000, man. Cheers to all of my comrades out there. Cheers to all the comrades out here. You get what I'm saying? It's been a lot of hard work. You know what I'm saying? I'm doing this for the people. You know, these live streams really don't make no money. It doesn't make me famous, and I don't even do this to get famous. I do this to educate myself and to chill with the people and help the people learn and grow. So for real, cheers to all of you. Cheers to all of you. We made it to page 1,000, man. And it's been a lot of hard work and struggle, man. Salute to our comrade Kirkham Down Stalin, who we met in this journey. Hopefully he stays along with the journey. Shout out to all the other commissars that joined us on this journey, you heard me. We still are not even finished with the book, but I'm just celebrating reading 1,000 pages. This isn't the first 1,000-page book I've read before. You know what I'm saying? This is not the first 1,000-page book I've read before. If you've ever read Long Walk to Freedom by Nelson Mandela, that's a long-ass book. And I had to read that book when my mama punished me. My mom punished me one time because I did something at school. I forgot. She took away my PlayStation, my cell phone, and made me read Long Walk to Freedom. And that I'm so glad my mom made me do that. You know what I mean? Because that's a glorious book. It's a beautiful book. And I suggest everybody go pick up Nelson Mandela's Long Walk to Freedom. But, yeah, cheers to all of you once again. To the comrades, to the people. All power to the Soviets. All power to the people. You get what I'm saying? It's been a long road. 1,000 pages, man. 1,000 pages. And when we started this, I said that a journey of 1,000 steps begins with one. You know what I'm saying? I've been coming on live for hours, almost every day, reading this book with the people. You know what I'm saying? And I couldn't have done it without the motivation of people like Kirkham Down Stalin and the other people who joined. The Wolf King says, the Wolf King says, be a real man, drink some vodka. We don't do vodka in this house. I'm a red wine type of guy. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, cheers to all of you as well. Beautiful, beautiful thing. All right, but yeah, yeah, man. It's all right, man. All right, where are the comments, real quick? Kirkham Down says he's smoking a bowl, man. He getting fried out. Boy, that shit was funny. That shit was funny. Okay, yeah, he meant FBA Youngboy. Whose name is FBA Youngboy up in here? Oh my God. Oh my God. FBA Youngboy. Who is coming up in here? Oh my God. Oh my God. FBA Youngboy. I don't know where to begin. I don't know where to begin with these people, man. Listen, let me finish off this page. Then we're going to shut the live stream down. But any comments? I would like to know, to the FBA people. Here's a good question. Since we have FBA Youngboy up in here. Number one, my favorite NBA Youngboy song is Lost Soul Survivor. So FBA Youngboy, I want to ask you, what's your favorite NBA Youngboy song? Because Lost Soul Survivor go absolutely crazy. And Mr. Grim Reaper. Mr. Grim Reaper and Lost Soul Survivor, I play those songs back to back whenever they come on. My second question for you, FBA Youngboy, and anybody else who's up in here is also FBA. Do you have a critique of capitalism? Because I know you guys like to go in on musty tethers and shit like that. But do you guys have any critique of capitalism? Or is it just once we get our reparations, it's done? It's done? Once we get reparations for slavery, it's just like, we're done? Like, there's nothing else to do? Like, I want to know, like, you know, what's plan B? Or, you know, what's step two? Is step one just, you know, $100,000, $200,000, $1 million, $10 million, a check? You know what I'm saying? Because we got it from the Fed? Or is there more? And do you have any critique of how that money is going to, you know, circulate in this imperialistic, decadent, wicked society? I want to know, to the FBA people, but I don't think they're listening. Okay? All right. Continuing here. Trotsky says, if we do not cite similar testimony about other corps and divisions, it is only because their chiefs were not as observant as Budberg, or they did not keep diaries, or these diaries have not yet come to light. But the corps standing near Dvinsk was distinguished in nothing but the trenchant style of its commander from the other corps of the Fifth Army, which in its turn was but little in advance of other armies. The Compromises Committee of the Fifth Army, which had long been hanging in the air, continued to send telegraphic threats to Petrograd to the effect that it would restore order in the rear with the bayonet. All that was mere braggadocio and hot air, writes Budberg. The committee was actually living its last days. On the 23rd, it failed of re-election. The president of the new Bolshevik committee was Dr. Skyalinsky. The president of the new Bolshevik committee was Dr. Skyalinsky, a magnificent young organizer who had developed his talent widely in the work of creating the Red Army, and who died subsequently an accidental death while canoeing on one of the American lakes. Okay. All right, Kung Fu Kenny says, step two is flex like the Dave Chappelle skit. Is that it? For the FBA people, is that it? We get the reparations and then we just flex? We do the money thing, you know what I'm saying? We do the money phone. We do the Kodak arm joint, you know what I'm saying? Is that it? Do we use it to form like a revolutionary vanguard party? Do we try to go back to Africa? Or is it what I imagine y'all are going to say, we start a business, brother. We start a business, brother. And we start the Black Wall Street, brother. That's what we're going to do, brother. Brother, we're going to get our reparations check, and then we're going to form Black Wall Street Enterprises. And with Black Wall Street Enterprises, we'll be able to buy our liberation, brother. We'll be able to start up our own Nike factory, brother. We'll be able to start up our own Reebok factory, brother. We're going to make up our own factory, and a few of us niggas are going to get really fucking rich. Some of us niggas are going to form record labels. Some of us are, going to form MLMs, drop shipping companies. You know what I'm saying? What are we going to do, brother? That's what we're going to do. We're going to form Black Wall Street, brother. We're going to have our own bakeries. We're going to have our own barbershops. We're going to have our own businesses. Black-owned businesses, brother. That's what we're going to have, brother. We're going to have niggas working for us. And a few niggas going to get really fucking rich. Some of them niggas going to fumble their check. But when they fumble their check, they can come and work for me, brother. That's what we're going to do with the reparations check. And that's step two, brother. Of black liberation through black capitalism. That's what we're going to do. I really want to know. I really hate y'all chased out FBA Youngboy, man. FBA Youngboy, I wish he was here. All right. Kirkham Down says, when I was in the FBA shit, I was wanting for there to be a separate country. That's the thing. Like, FBA could be hella radical, but they just stop at the idea of a check. And a check ain't really that radical. You get what I'm saying? And, the CPUSA, I spoke to Joe Sims, and Joe Sims told me straight up, they like reparations. But after reading Trotsky's chapter on the national question, the problem of nationalities, the most radical thing that we could ask for as black people in America is South Carolina. We want South Carolina, and fuck it, throw in North Carolina too. Y'all ain't gonna miss it, and y'all ain't doing nothing with it anyway, so let the niggas have it. Let us have South and North Carolina. Give us the cackalack where them crackers at. Give it back to the blacks. Give the cackalacks where the crackers at back to the blacks. That's the slogan. Jesse Jackson ain't died. He lived through me. I'm just saying, man. FBA ain't even that radical. It's just all about black business, brother. We gonna open up some businesses, brother. Black Wall Street, brother, with the reparations check, brother. That's what we gonna do, brother. Anyway. The assistant of the government commissar of the Northern Front reports to the war minister on the 22nd of October that the ideas of Bolshevism are making great headway in the army, that the mass wants peace, and that even the artillery, which has held out to the very last moment, has become hospitable to defeatist propaganda. This too is no unimportant symptom. The provisional government has no authority, reports its own direct agent 3 days before the revolution. All right. James Wright says, thoughts on Liberia. Liberia is a tragedy, and Liberia is when we think that nationalism alone can save us. Okay. The people that were exported or willingly expelled themselves from America after slavery just thought that, having a black-owned state was enough to create peace, prosperity. But really what was expelled to Liberia was a bourgeois clique of very, maybe not even wealthy black folks, but black folks that could quickly form a class separate from the Africans that were there, and then sought to dominate them. So yes, that goes to show that, one of the things that we should not be doing is thinking solely of racial, chauvinistic, bourgeois nationalism. Okay, the nationalism that we want is for a Soviet of South Carolina ran by black folks. We want the Soviet of South Carolina ran by the niggas. Okay, the working class, not the bourgeois blacks, not the bougie niggas, not even niggas like me, not even niggas like me. But what we want is the South Carolina Soviet. Okay, not Liberia, and to some degree, not even Haiti, not even Haiti. We want something totally different, something that hasn't been seen, and we have to have radical imagination. And this is one of the things that holds us back. We don't have radical imagination enough to, actually, push for that. You get what I'm saying? But it is possible, and Trotsky has laid out how it is possible. Nothing is impossible. We can even get a nuclear submarine in our hands if we do it right. That's some real shit. Some real shit. But I digress. All right. To be sure, the Military Revolutionary Committee did not then know. Well, sorry, before I continue, James Wright, what do you think of Liberia? What do you think of Haiti? What do you think of any predominant black nation with a black ruling class? Okay? All right. So, to be sure, the Military Revolutionary Committee did not then know of all these documents, but what it did not know was amply sufficient. On the 23rd, representatives of various units at the front filed past the Petrograd Soviet and demanded peace. Otherwise, they answered they would march to the rear and destroy all the parasites who want to keep on fighting for another 10 years. Seize the power, the front men said to the Soviet. The trenches will support you. In the more remote and backward fronts, the Southwestern and Romanian Bolsheviks were still rare specimens, curiosities, but the mood of the soldiers here was the same as elsewhere. Evgenia Bosch tells how in the Second Corps of the Guards, quartered in the vicinity of Zemerinka, among 60,000 soldiers, there was one young communist and two sympathizers. This did not prevent the Corps from coming out in support of the insurrection in the October days. So what does that tell you right here? What does that tell you? Trotsky says that, once again, the Bolsheviks, the communists at this time, and this is right before the October Revolution, were still a minority. They were a sizable section, but they were still a minority. When he went out, when the lady Evgeny went to see the soldiers, there was only one communist in the group, but yet and still the soldiers were all on board with the idea of the insurrection, of taking over the government and putting the power in the hands of the Soviets, showing once again, we don't need a bunch of people to call themselves communists or socialists. We just have to have the right policy and strike at the right time. But what do you think? Okay? So, all right. Hulk Maniac says, I got kicked out in silence because I said I support reparations for blacks. I don't understand. I must run the wrong way. I love blacks. I have black friends and family. I'm so confused, Hulk Maniac. Where did you get kicked out of? I'm sorry. Did you get kicked out of here because you said reparations for blacks? Or is it because you said some right-wing, reactionary bullshit? Tell the truth. Tell the whole truth. Tell the whole truth. Shout out to our commissar, Kirkham Down Stalin. Shout out to our commissar, Kirkham Down Stalin, who came up here and smacked the white supremacists who was spitting some fake statistics. I'm always so sad to see that the white supremacists don't even understand how statistics work. They keep on quoting the same thing. 13% of the population could be 30% of the fucking They keep saying this shit. Do they not understand that statistics change every year? The one way to shut down that stupid ass argument white supremacists say that 13% of the population, they keep saying that shit. Ask them what year, because it's impossible for that same statistic to apply every single year. It's so fucking simple, but yet and still they quote it as if it's from the Bible. It's so fucking dumb. They're the dumbest people on the planet. I swear to God. This is why I don't even try to argue with them. This is why I currently, give great power to my commissars to be able to summarily send these people to the gulag. Because what type of dumbass continues to repeat a stupid ass talking point like that? 13%. Shut the fuck up. What year? What year? Cracker ass cracker. What year? Because even when I say the majority of sexual assaults, pedophilic acts, and bestial acts against animals are committed by white men, I don't say it's 30% of the 40% of white men do. I don't say that. It just tends to be the trend over the years. But they still come and quote this same statistic as if it's absolutely true, showing how dumb they are. It's really fucking dumb. Really fucking dumb. And even if they start to quote the years, well, it happened in 2024, 2025, start quoting how often white men have sex with their own children, have sex with an animal. You can't make this shit up, man. You can't make this shit up. And once again, we don't want to be reactionary going back and forth with these types of people. Because number one, they're most likely bots, and they don't actually care. Okay? They don't actually. It doesn't matter what you say to them because they're probably not even real people. Like this person, Sonny iRobot. He's literally a bot. He's literally advertising that he's a bot. Okay. All right. Yeah. Anyway, Hulk Maniac, I'm sorry that you got banned from whatever chat room you were in. But the question here is not just simply about reparations. It's about socialism. So I would ask you, Hulk Maniac, would you support black people taking one of the states for themselves to create an independent, sovereign, socialist state? Let's ask you, Hulk Maniac, since you love black people so much, do you love us enough to leave us the fuck alone so we can have our own state? How about that? All we want is South Carolina, maybe North Carolina. Give us the Cackalacks where the crack is at. Give it back to the blacks. That's all we ask. Come on. Come on, Hulk Maniac. Since you love black folks so much, since you want to give us some money, how about this, Hulk Maniac? Since you love black folks so much, drop a super chat for a young nigga. Since you love black folks so much, drop a super chat for a young nigga. Do that. Till then, you probably a racist cracker-ass cracker. Till then, that's probably what you is anyway. I digress. Let's continue here. We're wrapping up. This is the last paragraph. Last paragraphs I'm reading, then I'm wrapping up this live stream. Let's go. To the very last hour, the government circles rested their hope in the Cossacks, but the less blind among the politicians of the right camp understood that here too things were in a very bad way. The Cossack officers were Kornilovist, almost to a man. The rank and file were tending more and more to the left. In the government, they did not understand this, imagining that the coolness of the Cossack regiments to the Winter Palace was caused by injured feelings about Kaledin. In the long run, however, it became clear, even to the Minister of Justice, Maliantovich, that only the Cossack officers were supporters of Kaledin. The rank-and-file Cossacks, like all soldiers, were simply going Bolshevik. Final paragraph. Of that front that in the early days of the march on that front that in the early days of March had kissed the hands and feet of liberal priests, had carried cadet ministers on his shoulders, got drunk on the speeches of Kerensky, and believed that the Bolsheviks were German agents, of that there was nothing left. Those rosy illusions have been drowned in the mud of the trenches, which the soldiers refused to go on kneading with their leaky boots. The denouement is approaching, wrote Budberg on the very day of the Petrograd insurrection, and there can be no doubt of its outcome. On our front, there is not one single unit which would not be in control of the Bolsheviks. So that's the end of chapter 42. I am more impressed that the Bolsheviks fought all that counter-revolution that Trotsky detailed than the fact they won the Russian Civil War. I'm going to keep it real. Reading this book gives me more appreciation for the fact that this group of people who had basically no money, were laughed out of many offices and halls, had radical ideas, were able to overcome counter-revolutionary forces that we still deal with today. In this chapter alone, we were able to see that the arguments against modern-day socialists were used against the OG socialists. They're out of touch. They're just a bunch of intellectuals. They don't know what it's like to work. And yet and still, they overcome every single type of obstacle from February up to October. It's an incredible story. Even if you're not a communist, even if you're not a socialist, you got to look at what the Bolsheviks did and be like, damn, they did that shit. You get what I'm saying? Anyway, let's go here. Kirkham Down Stalin said he's silent. James Wright says, I think you nailed it with Liberia was a tragedy, and I would like to think it could be done better these days. I mean, it could be better if instead of saying that we're going to rule over Africans by going to Africa and basically being American colonists in blackface, how about instead we work alongside our African brothers and sisters to create a society where the wealth that is created is equally shared by those who help create it? It's not that hard. That's what socialism is. That's what communism is. The idea from each according to his ability to each according to his need. Instead of what happened in Liberia, which is I'm a rich black person descended from slaves in America, and you niggas are going to work on my Firestone plants and make me rich while I get leaf down and pipe down. White down. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, continuing here. Hulk Maniac says, my wife is black. I'm going to be honest, brother. I love that blacks. I love blacks. But not enough to send one that I don't even know money. You hate black people. Just say you hate black people. I'm just being honest, brother. I'm just being honest. So you willing to tell me that you love black folks so much that when you see a black man out here fighting for not only his people, but also your people as well, and supposedly your pretty mixed children that you're going to have with your beautiful black wife, you can't donate to a young nigga's cause. Fuck you, cracker. Fuck you, cracker, you racist ass cracker. That's what you is. If you won't donate, nigga, get the fuck out of here. We don't want that around here. You probably a racist ass cracker. You probably get mad and call your wife a nigger bitch. Keep it real. We don't fuck with you, motherfucker. If you want to donate to a young nigga's cause, and I'm going to university too. I'm out here going to school. I'm out here reading books with the people. I'm out here paying bills. I'm out here doing a whole bunch of shit. And you say you love black people so much, you won't donate to a young nigga? Fuck you, cracker. I'm not begging for money. I'm not begging for money. You a whole hoe. Your grandfather was probably in the KKK. Your grandfather probably lynched a black man and still keeps that big black dick in a mason jar. You sick bastard. Get the fuck out of here. Fuck out of here. Fuck out of here. We want the Soviet of South Carolina, and you won't even donate to a young nigga. You don't love black people. You look your wife in the eye and you call her a nigger bitch. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. You bastard. Anyway. All right. Iman Manifesto is in the horizontal live stream chat. What are you drinking? All right. Sorry, Iman Manifesto. My bad, man. My bad, Imanifesto. My bad, Imanifesto. Didn't see your comments. My bad. My bad. But he was talking about the FBAs and how they have no critique of capitalism. Tariq has no critique of capitalism, therefore most of the FBAs don't. Okay, so yeah, that's Long Read to Freedom is absolutely true. Long Road to Freedom is a great book, man. I suggest all of y'all pick it up. Okay, let's check the poll right here. Okay, let's check the poll. So in the horizontal live stream, we have, can a revolution succeed through spontaneity alone? The poll is tied. Yes, the masses are enough. Got slightly ahead with the majority, 34%. I don't know how that's possible with 3 votes, but I digress. Let's go. Okay. All right. Okay. We have to get out of here. Let's close out the live stream. All right, let's close up. This has been a hilarious live stream. I did not expect it to be this raw. I should do more where I just chat with you motherfuckers, man. I should. But yeah, we're almost done with this book, man. We're almost done. Let's close up the poll. Let's see what y'all had to say. So, which matters most in a successful revolution? Military superiority, 50%. Mass support and organization, 25%. Unsure but fuck Trump and MAGA, 20%. A small committed minority, 5%. Interesting. Okay. Anyway, let's go to these final comments I'll read right here before we get out of here. All right. Hulk Maniac says, I have not called you any out of your name other than saying brother. See, why you put the extra R on it? Why you say brother with the hard R? Now you a white supremacist. You a whole racist cracker just trying to come around here. Hulk Maniac, how dare you take my favorite superhero's name and bastardize it? You KKK Klan member cracker you. I hope you burn in the pits of hell. In fact, when we start the Soviet of South Carolina, we are going to explicitly ban you. Your fine-ass black wife can come over. Your fine-ass big booty Nubian queen can come over. But you got to stay outside. You have to stay outside the borders of the Soviet of South Carolina, and you have to whimper and suffer under the sun. You pale-skinned, snow demon, devil-ass bitch. Okay? Kirkham Down Scholar says, give $5 to a young nigga. You will not donate to a young nigga, so you are banished, Hulk Maniac. You are not to come around here anymore. If I see your face, you are instantly known as our local KKK member who has a black wife who doesn't know. You have to be Candace Owens' husband. You have to be Candace Owens' husband to be this way. All right? Hulk Maniac says, why you refer to yourselves as YNs? I didn't call myself that, but sure. Actually, I did call myself. Yeah, donate to a young nigga. I did say that. Why pick a fight with FBA? Aren't you both brothers? I'm just trying to understand. Okay, Hulk Maniac, are MAGA your brothers? When you see them 3-tooth rednecks come out the woods talking about, yeah, brother, take away my health care, brother. Are those your brothers too? Are those your brothers too? When you see MAGA come out the woods, yeah, brother, send my money to Israel, brother. Yeah, brother. You know what I love to do? I love to bomb school children in Iran, brother. Are those your brothers? Hulk Maniac, when you see them 3-tooth rednecks come out the woods flying Confederate flags, are those your brother? This is a serious question. Let's find out if Hulk Maniac can stay. Hulk Maniac, direct question. When you see them rednecks, them crack-ass crackers in Louisiana, Mississippi, Tennessee, Texas, Kentucky, throwing up the stars and bars out the back of their pickup trucks, are those your brothers? Let us know. Let us know, Hulk Maniac. I can wait. I got 5 minutes to wait. Are those your brothers? Them rednecks drinking beer on the back of a pickup truck, just the good old boys doing some good old fun. When you see them throwing up the stars and bars, marching down the street. He says, typo, not. Okay, no, answer the question, Hulk Maniac. I know there's no delay on this. You can hear me, Hulk Maniac. When you see them crack-ass crackers throwing up the stars and bars, talking about the South will rise again, brother. Hulk Maniac says, I do not associate with that trash. Now you don't associate with that trash, huh? Well, that's the same way we feel about FBA, okay? Same way. If you don't associate with that trash, since that's white trash, okay, FBA is our version of that, okay? My wife would not allow it either. Nigga, get the fuck out of here. You do not have a black wife, okay? Somebody like you does not have a black wife. James Wright says his response was held for review, so might not be showing up. Understood, he says. Okay, all right. We're going to wrap up this. This was absolutely fantastic and fun. I have not had fun like this on a live stream for a long time. Y'all have been cool. Shout out to James Wright, top commissar. Shout out to Kirkham Down Stalin, top commissar. Big fuck you to Hulk Maniac. He's a whole bitch. A racist bastard. Fuck Hulk Maniac. Who else was in here that was really cool? FBA Youngboy. FBA Youngboy, come back, man. We got to chop it up. Yeah. Shout out to Elon Musket. I hope he jumps off a bridge. And everybody else. Everybody else. Y'all have been cool. Y'all be easy out there. All power to the people. All power to the people. And peace.